Chapter 647. After the light swords fell. The warhound's giant sword and the fierce wind blades slashed down in an instant. They raised their hands at the same time, and in an instant, a chi shield appeared in their hands. Those giant swords hit the chi shield one after another. The chi shield seemed to have a pair of eyes and swallowed all the fierce wind blades in front of it. Ji Yu's eyes suddenly lit up. How could such a thing happen? At this moment, those Shen beasts raised their heads. Their blood-red eyes immediately released a demonic red light. They let out a loud roar. Countless balls of fire spat out fireballs in an instant. Ji Yu held the treasure weapon and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When he appeared in the next moment, he was already in front of those level 8 Shen beasts. The warhound's giant sword released countless balls of fire in an instant. Ding! The host used raging flames to burn the city and gained experience points 1 by 999. As soon as the system's voice sounded, the weapon in Ji Yu's hand suddenly lit up brightly. All that could be seen was the fireballs flying towards the Shen beasts. Boom, boom, boom. After 3 loud sounds, those Shen beasts flew out. In the blink of an eye, Ji Yu disappeared in the next moment. When he appeared in the next moment, he raised his hand. He directly used the warhound's giant sword to cut off their heads. The heads fell to the ground. Ji Yu looked in the direction of the picture scroll. The picture in the picture scroll was still changing, but the aura of the Gold City sect disciples on the picture scroll had changed greatly. Now, they had stabilized their own realms. Ji Yu suddenly disappeared on the spot. He said faintly, "You can come back now." After he said this, the picture scroll in the air was suddenly released. In the next moment, dozens of people appeared in front of the picture scroll. They all sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "Greetings, Brother Ji." After saying this, they all knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing. They only saw Ji Yu disappear in an instant, and in the next moment, he appeared in the sky. Ji Yu said lightly, "You've been gone for a month." After Ji Yu said this, they all took a step back and looked at each other. Ji Yu said lightly, "Haha. I didn't expect that you've stabilized your Shen energy. Now we just need to wait for the time to come." Suddenly, a ray of light lit up in the sky. In the blink of an eye, Ji Yu disappeared on the spot and reappeared in the next moment. Then flew into the main hall. A few elders were surprised. Their disciples had been missing for an entire month, but there were still so many Shen beasts. When they saw this, their hearts couldn't help but tremble slightly. But they didn't expect Ji Yu to defeat so many Shen beasts in a day. After seeing so many people, they felt a little ashamed in their hearts. Ji Yu waved his hand. At that moment, a few people in the surroundings came forward. Ji Yu said calmly, "Next, we'll just have to wait for the fat pig to deliver himself to us." After he said this, the sky suddenly shook. Countless people in the surroundings slowly took a step forward and released 2 artifacts from their storage rings. They looked at each other. Ji Yu said lightly, "I'll leave this to the 2 of you." After Ji Yu said this, they all stepped forward and picked up the treasures in front of them. After putting away the treasures, they instantly disappeared from their original spots. Ji Yu said lightly, "How do you feel with these 2 treasures?" As Ji Yu's voice fell, the elders looked at each other. Although they didn't want to admit it, the rest of the people looked at each other. At this moment, the rest of the people came in one after another. They cupped their hands and bowed. They bowed slightly and said lightly, "There's thunder outside." After they said this, the people around them went into a hubbub. They slowly opened their mouths and said, "Elders, the people of Magnificent Mystery Sect have arrived." After hearing Ji Yu's words, they all came forward. At this moment, a dense crowd appeared in the sky. There seemed to be a trace of disdain in their eyes. In their hearts, it was just a small sect from the Gold City. After they said this, they took a step forward. Ji Yu said lightly, "Today, our 5 sects have gathered together to test the disciples of the other sects." After saying this, Ji Yu disappeared in the sky. After a while, several lightning bolts appeared in the sky. Ji Yu said indifferently, "Who's here?" At this moment, countless people walked out. They held long blades in their hands and laughed as they walked in. They clasped their hands at the people in front of them and said, "My name is Li Yu." I am the great elder of the mysterious sword sect. Today, I have brought my subordinates to greet you all. After he said this, a few people from the Gold City sect came out and led them into the reception hall. Jiyu said indifferently, "Is there anyone else?" A few elders gathered behind Jiyu and looked at Jiyu and said, "There are still 3 sects coming." As soon as he finished speaking, the 3 groups of people slowly walked through the gate. They were looking at the people from the Gold City sect with arrogance. After they were invited to stay, Jiyu went back to the stone room. There was still 1 day before the 5 profound gathering. Jiyu felt that the sky splitter was about to break through. He sat cross-legged on the ground. He closed his eyes and started to operate the sky splitter. Ding! Host used the sky splitter. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. As the experience points continued to enter his body, Jiyu's Shen energy continued to expand. At this moment, Jiyu raised his hand. 5 rays of mystic light appeared in the void. They represented the 5 types of Shen energy: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Jiyu said indifferently, "Enter." As soon as Jiyu finished speaking, the 5 rays of light suddenly flew into his body one after another. Chapter 648. Ding! Wind inheritance gained experience points, 1 by 999, ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to the 2nd level of the human profound realm. Ding! Fire inheritance gained experience points, 1 by 999, ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to the 2nd level of the human profound realm. Several voices rang out continuously. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to the next level. The power of the 5 inheritances in his body actually broke through to the next level in an instant. Seeing this scene unfold before his eyes, Jiyu said indifferently, "Rise." When the 5 profound energies returned to Jiyu's body, he stood up. At that moment, the profound energies in his body were suddenly released. At that moment, the ground in front of him started to crack open. Just by moving his hands, he already had such power. How could anyone not be afraid of him? Jiyu said indifferently, "I finally broke through to the next level." He let out a long sigh. After leaving the stone room, the surrounding people walked towards Jiyu and looked at each other. Jiyu said indifferently, "I didn't expect that such an accident would happen." He sensed the profound energy in his hand and smiled faintly. At this moment, another ray of light appeared in the sky. Jiyu felt that this profound energies was actually the powerful profound energies of the human profound realm. His feet started to move instantly. Ding! Host used the dark forest and gained experience points, 1 by 999. Jiyu flew to the front of the profound fallen immortal sect. He saw a young girl in white robes in the profound fallen immortal sect's lodging. She was waving a silver sword in her hand under the moonlight. It was as if there was a celestial melody that kept ringing out. She followed the melody in the sky and kept jumping up and down before landing on the ground again. Jiyu only felt that the other party was extremely beautiful, but he couldn't think of anything else. He took a step forward and suddenly heard a clap of thunder in the sky. The young girl in front of him was holding a precious weapon. In the blink of an eye, she flew in front of Jiyu. She turned around and stabbed the long sword in her hand and arrived in front of Jiyu. Jiyu asked in confusion, "Why are you stabbing me?" He merely raised his hand and used 2 fingers to clamp down on the incoming sword. As Jiyu bent his hand slightly, the precious weapon instantly broke apart. The precious weapon broke into 2 halves. The young girl looked at her precious weapon in shock. "How can you? This is my best prized artifact." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiyu waved his hand and the treasured weapon froze in place. After seeing her own treasure, her eyes revealed a surprised smile. She curiously asked, "You're so powerful, what's your name?" After hearing this, Jiyu said indifferently, "What about you, Jiyu?" "They all call me Fairy Ruolan." Jiyu smiled faintly, "Then I'll call you Little Ruolan from now on. What do you think? Only those close to me can call me Ruolan. If you become my master, I'll agree." After hearing this, Jiyu smiled faintly, "All right, I'll agree." Everyone looked at each other. Jiyu said faintly, "As your master, I'll teach you a set of sword techniques." After saying this, he followed the others and displayed the sword techniques. When he saw that this little girl didn't seem to understand, he had no choice but to hold her little hand. That said, Jiyu had no idea that Fairy Ruolan was the most beautiful celestial maiden in the entire ancient mystic lineage. Countless people wanted to grovel under her skirt. However, such a hand that countless cultivators dreamed of touching was actually in Jiyu's hands. After practicing a set of sword techniques, they looked at each other. He slowly took a step forward. Jiyu said faintly, "I'll be leaving first." There was a trace of admiration in Fairy Ruolan's eyes. Jiyu disappeared on the spot in an instant. In the next moment, the people around her suddenly walked out slowly and unsheathed their long swords. Who dares to trespass on Fairy Ruolan's mountain range? When they saw Jiyu, they were ecstatic. Jiyu had raised the level of their inner sect disciples a few days ago. The remaining few people stepped forward one after another. Jiyu said faintly, "Why? Do you still want to catch me?" The few people looked at each other. How could they dare to catch Jiyu? On the contrary, they smelled a trace of a woman's fragrance on Jiyu. Could it be that Jiyu and Fairy Ruolan had been in close contact earlier? They immediately felt extremely envious. They took a step back. Jiyu said faintly, "Relay my orders." After hearing Jiyu's words, the rest of the people exchanged glances and said calmly, "That's not it. We'll retreat now." Jiyu returned to the stone chamber and closed her eyes. Early the next morning, countless drumbeats were heard. Boom, boom, boom. After 3 drumbeats, all the disciples opened their eyes. They put on their clothes and walked out of the door. They came to the central square of the Gold City sect. 6 stone pillars were inserted into the center of the plaza, near the stage. The 6 stone pillars gradually merged with the profound energy, as if they were a huge cover, enveloping the entire stage. Jiyu saw this scene and said faintly, "I didn't expect that the 5 profound gathering would be so grand." After he finished speaking, several claps of thunder suddenly sounded in the sky. Countless people slowly walked up to the arena. The Gold City sect's sect master had not appeared for a long time, but today, he ended his seclusion for the selection of the 5 sects. When he landed on the ground with his profound beast, everyone cast a pleasantly surprised look in his direction. The old man's aura was incomparably majestic. The hearts of the sect leaders of the few great sects trembled slightly. They could faintly sense it in their hearts. This long sword actually had such a terrifying power. He slowly said, "He has already reached the peak of the 5th layer of the human profound realm." The remaining few people looked at each other. A hint of shock appeared at the corners of their mouths. The remaining sect masters of the 4 sects furrowed their eyebrows tightly. Chapter 649. The remaining people walked out one after another and cupped their hands. "I didn't expect that the Gold City sect leader would have such a big breakthrough. Congratulations." The few of them smiled and cupped their hands to each other. The Gold City sect leader looked very happy. He laughed loudly and said, "You're too polite, you're too polite." He said faintly, "Today is the 5 sects meeting. How about we start now?" Of course, the 5 profound meeting wasn't just a battle outside the mountain gate. It was just that once they entered the training palace, the one who could get the most points would be the leader of the 5 alliances. Jiyu led everyone to the mountain gate. They saw a huge golden light emitting from the training palace. The remaining disciples of the other sects all rushed to be the first to enter, fearing that they would be left behind. Jiyu saw this scene. Just as the Gold City sect was about to enter the training palace, Jiyu suddenly smiled and pulled them back. She said faintly, "Wait." After saying this, they entered the training palace. After all of them had entered, Jiyu led the Gold City sect disciples into the training palace. After everyone had disappeared, the door to the trial palace slowly closed. Jin Cheng said faintly, "Your disciples have all entered." "Everyone, I suddenly remembered that there seems to be a sealed yellow rank Shen beast in the training palace." "What?" After a Shen beast broke through to the 10th level, it was divided into heaven, earth, Shen, and yellow ranks. When they advanced again, it was equivalent to breaking through to the life and death realm. Moreover, they could take human form. After thinking about this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The Gold City sect leader said faintly, "This is something that I just thought of." However, they didn't expect that they would look at each other and say faintly, "Not good, then what should we do with our disciples?" Jin Cheng frowned. "If that's the case, there's only one way. Let's hear it." After saying this, the Gold City sect leader took a step forward and said faintly, "Now, there's only one way." After saying this, he gathered a powerful dark force in his hand. Suddenly, at this moment, the dark force in his body gathered together. He turned around and said faintly, "Let's gather all of our dark force together. Only then can we seal them." After shouting those words, the crowd beside him gradually took a step forward. "All right, our fallen immortal profound sect will definitely lend you a hand." The remaining few profound sects also walked out one after another. They sat on the ground and gathered all their profound chi together and poured it into the trial palace. The leader of the Jincheng sect also raised his hand. He poured his profound energy into the training palace. At this time, a ray of white light appeared in the palace. Jiyu's mind moved and 2 life treasures appeared in his hands. With a flash, he disappeared from where he stood. At this moment, the huge rocks in the surroundings suddenly moved. The people from the 5 great sects all took out their life treasures. Although these rocks were huge, they were nothing in the eyes of the profound cultivators. However, these rocks seemed to be endless as they continuously flew out from everywhere. Jiyu could see that there was an array here. With this thought in mind, Jiyu took a step forward and said faintly, "Heaven and earth order, turn." After Jiyu shouted this sentence, a bright light appeared in the sky. The command flags in the sky kept dancing in the air. At this moment, those command flags gradually came to Jiyu's hand. Jiyu stretched out his hand and waved it forward. Instantly, those command flags came to Jiyu. At this moment, the profound stones above fell to the ground. Jiyu heaved a sigh of relief. In an instant, Jiyu's body flashed and he disappeared from where he stood. He slowly took a step forward. Many people appeared around him. They were all puppets. Jiyu said faintly, "The second stage has appeared." At this moment, countless puppets slowly walked towards Jiyu. After seeing this scene, Jiyu said slowly, "These are puppets. You all should be careful." When they heard this, they all retreated and arrived in front of Jiyu. Jiyu said faintly, 18 golden puppets." At this moment, the 18 golden puppets in front of him suddenly appeared. They raised their heads and said faintly, "Come out." After saying this, many puppets appeared in the sky. At this moment, those puppets charged towards Jiyu. Jiyu suddenly stretched out his hand and waved it forward. In an instant, the 18 golden puppets rushed forward. The only way to break through the puppets was to break through the threads of profound chi that controlled them. As soon as he said that, countless threads were pulled out and danced around the surrounding puppets. Jiyu's body disappeared in an instant when he saw this. He saw that there seemed to be a small stone pillar among the puppets. After seeing that stone pillar, Jiyu punched it heavily. There was a loud boom. At this moment, the stone pillar suddenly became extremely bright. At this moment, a huge puppet stood up. It actually used the power of 3 layers of puppets. In an instant, the 3 layers of puppets gradually merged together. The giant roared at the sky. At this time, the puppets in the air quickly merged together and ran in the direction of the giant. In an instant, those puppets merged with the giant's body. The giant roared and slapped down in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu's chi aura suddenly surged and pierced through the chi aura. With a loud boom, he said faintly, "Kill." In an instant, a huge treasure appeared in his hand. He held the warhound's great sword and jumped up heavily, running towards the huge puppet. Although the giant in front of him had become incomparably strong after merging with so many puppets, its movements had become slower. Chapter 650. Although the giant's movements were slow, it was still easy for him to grab Jiyu. Jiyu's 3,000 clouds movement had already reached its peak. But every time she appeared, it was exactly where the giant's palm was about to land. How could there be so many coincidences in this world? His gaze was locked onto Ji-Yu's body. After Ji-Yu disappeared, he once again felt Ji-Yu's path and heavily landed his palm. Ji-Yu only now understood that the other party didn't have any remarkable abilities. But through the changes in profound energy, he had completely figured out where her palm was going. Ji-Yu's figure flashed and disappeared from her original spot. Ding, the host used 3000 clouds movement. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Since you can figure out where I'm going, then I won't hide anymore. Thinking of this, Ji-Yu heavily swung the warhound's great sword in her hand forward. The disciples of the various sects who were surrounded by the puppets were already scared out of their wits when they saw the giant puppet Mo Yang. How could they still have any thoughts of dodging? They only saw Ji-Yu suddenly disappear from her original spot. When she reappeared, she was already in front of the giant. An expert was indeed an expert. Ji-Yu's sword fell. In an instant, a profound light appeared in the sky. What a shocking profound energy! Where did such a terrifying profound energy come from? A look of disbelief appeared on everyone's faces. Ji-Yu indifferently thought in her heart. Right now, the battle between the two had already turned into a life and death struggle. Her mortal profound realm strength could no longer be hidden. Everyone outside the trial palace was even more shocked. The other 4 sect masters all sucked in a breath of cold air. I never thought that Jin City's sect would have such an outstanding disciple. That's right. Sect Master Jin City makes me feel ashamed. Jin City laughed out loud. But in his mind, how could he not remember which sect's disciple this youth belonged to? But this wasn't important, as long as it didn't affect his plan. There was a loud rumbling sound. Although the puppet statue was powerful, it was still extremely weak in front of someone at the early second level of the human profound realm. After receiving Ji-Yu's sword strike, its body turned into stone and slowly fell to the ground. What a powerful ability! They all sucked in a breath of cold air. Ji-Yu's figure flashed. Under the situation where no one was aware, she used her own profound energy to entangle the hundreds of puppets present. Her divine sense entered their bodies in an instant. In the blink of an eye, those puppets had turned into supreme treasures. Ji-Yu waved his hand and all the puppets entered his pocket. As the giant puppet turned into ashes, the air suddenly shook and countless rocks fell. Ji-Yu frowned as she looked at the falling rocks. With a flash, he appeared several hundred meters away. He raised his hand, only to see that the artifact was already in his hand. An immortal path appeared in front of everyone. All the disciples seemed to have forgotten the tragic situation just now. On the path of cultivation, if one was only afraid of death, then they would never become a peerless expert. Without the slightest hesitation, they all charged into the immortal path. They all rushed into the immortal path with long spears in hand. All of a sudden, the world became dark and gloomy. The entire immortal path seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Everyone anxiously shouted, "Run!" No one knew who was the first to shout this sentence. At this moment, the people in front of them could be said to be 8 immortals crossing the sea, each showing their remarkable abilities. However, there were some who wanted to use their artifact to bypass the immortal path, but they didn't expect to be beaten back into the immortal path. It was as if there were 2 barriers that could completely lock them in. If everyone was united, then it would be easy. However, everyone was still thinking about the sect trial. How could they be truly united? Some of them were afraid. The artifact in their hands had already attacked the disciples of the other 4 sects. However, the immortal path was in a mess. The nightmare wasn't over yet. From both sides of the immortal path, countless short people like dried corpses crawled out of nowhere. Everyone began to display their own profound skills. Unexpectedly, these little people were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they were already riding on top of the people. A pair of sharp claws directly greeted their heads. They were only ordinary disciples. How could they withstand such a huge attack? From time to time, they would vomit blood and fall into the immortal path one after another. When the crowd above saw this scene, everyone's eyes were filled with blood. They felt pity for their dead companions. At this moment, Ji-yu slowly walked towards the immortal path, as if he was the savior of the world. When everyone saw Ji-yu, they all gathered behind him. They didn't know why, but this man who looked much younger than them actually gave them a strong sense of security. Mystic skill, Ice River of 10,000 miles. Ding, host used 10,000 miles of glacier. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. It seemed that after entering the spirit profound realm, Ji-yu could freely control the mystic skills in his hands. From time to time, he could even create his own mystic skills. Although the mystic skills he created were only at the yellow stage, he was very confident that as time passed, the mystic skills in his hands would level up because of the system's experience points reward. The warhound's great sword moved and suddenly, the temperature in the air dropped. It was as if countless cold air had turned the immortal path into a glacier. Those little people who were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws had just charged forward when they were frozen by this powerful glacier, turning into beautiful ice sculptures. The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. The mortal profound realm was indeed the mortal profound realm. Just a single mystic skill actually had such a terrifying power. They looked at each other. Fortunately, the competition this time was not in the arena. Otherwise, how could they compete with him with just the few of them? At this moment, a gentle voice entered Ji-yu's ears. Master. Hearing this joyous voice, Ji-yu looked up. So it was the young girl he met, the fairy named Ruolan. Why are you here? Master's question is funny. I am a fairy from the fallen immortal sect. Why can't I appear here? Chapter 651. Upon hearing this, Ji-yu finally understood that this girl was actually a fairy from the fallen immortal sect. He patted her head. At this moment, a few hot-blooded men couldn't hold it in anymore. Although they relied on Ji-yu to pass the immortal path, even without Ji-yu, could any one of them pass the immortal path? What a joke! They couldn't help but think in their hearts. At the same time, they took a step forward. They pointed at Ji-yu's nose and shouted, "Where did this lecture come from? Let go of our fairy. Your family is now." Ruolan's heart was filled with doubts when she heard this. She wasn't married yet, so how did she become someone else's? Even if she were to marry, it should at least be someone like her master. Ji-yu's incomparable handsomeness naturally attracted the attention of these female disciples. It was as if they wanted to stick their eyes on Ji-yu. Ji-yu shrugged nonchalantly and said, "Whatever. What do you want? What do you want?" There was an incomparable majesty in this sentence. But what could they do? Although Ji-yu's martial arts were at the second level of the human profound realm and no one doubted his level, it was just a trashy cultivation method cultivated by a trashy disciple of the Gold City sect. Any disciple of the magnificent holy sect who was at the 9th level of the spirit profound realm could be transferred to a human profound realm elder of a third-rate sect. Although they were only a second-rate sect in the union of 10,000 immortals and were the trashy fighters among the second-rate sects, it was precisely them who walked into the frozen land and killed those guards of the sect. They also obtained a large number of treasures in the evolving temple. One of them said, "Kid, I think you don't know what's good for you. You just used a profound skill to freeze these villains. What's there to be proud of? That's right. How dare you defile a fairy? Die." Ji-yu clearly didn't do anything to Ruolan fairy. Even if he did, it wasn't up to this group of stinky juniors to judge. He was instantly enraged, and he disappeared from where he stood. He definitely had to teach them a lesson. He pulled out the long blade in his hand and swung it down heavily. Suddenly, the surrounding ground shattered. He arrived in front of that brat from the magnificent holy sect who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He grabbed their necks with both hands and lifted them up high. They had been pampered since they were young, so they had never seen such a terrifying scene. Even Fairy Ruolan from the fallen immortal sect, who was watching this scene from the side, could not bear to see it. Master, they have good intentions. Why don't we just forget about it?" Normally, Ruolan was only concerned about the cultivation of her profound energy. When had she ever seen the dangers of the pugilistic world? However, Jiyu was different. He had traveled extensively and had seen many things. He only said indifferently, "If I let them go so easily now, do you believe that they will dare to plot against me later? They won't." Really? The corner of Jiyu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Although they did not know why, they felt that this smile was very scary, but they did not dare to say anything. A mysterious light flashed and the two stanchions were broken by Jiyu's punch. It was impossible for them to cultivate again in this lifetime. How can there be such a cruel method? This is the good disciple that you have taught. The sect masters of the 4 great sects all angrily rebuked. Although the sect master of Jin City did not know when he had accepted such a disciple, now that he had achieved his goal, it was time to put down his mask. Ha ha ha. The elders of the 4 great sects did not know why this elder of Jin City still had the face to laugh. You have taught such a disciple, but you don't know how to reflect on yourself. What are you laughing about? The sect master of the profound sword sect, Unfettered One, was the first to lose his temper. He used one hand to maintain the seal of the trial hall and the other hand to point forward. In an instant, the bloodless bone sword, a 7th grade artifact beside him, flew into the air. With the infusion of Shen energy, the 7th grade artifact turned into more than 80 swords in an instant. Even if others used their own mental strength to infuse the artifact, in a short period of time, they were unable to distinguish which one was the real one. He pointed heavily in the direction of the sect master of Jin City. In an instant, the long sword was directly in front of him. He snorted coldly. "It's just a small trick." After saying this, the sword in the air actually stopped in the air. Under the gaze of the sect master of Jin City, it actually fell to the ground. He gasped in surprise and said faintly, "How is this possible? How did you do it?" Hearing the sect master of Jin City's exclamation, he smiled slightly and said faintly, "Don't you think there's something wrong with you now?" After saying this, the sect master of the sword sect closed his eyes. Only then did he realize that the amount of Shen energy he could use was only 1/10 of the usual amount. What is going on? After hearing his exclamation, the rest of the people began to investigate their own internal aura. They found that without exception, the aura of everyone present was getting smaller and smaller. They still didn't understand what was going on. The sect master of the Jin City sect laughed out loud. "It's good that you don't understand. I can't let you die of stupidity. I'm not afraid to tell you that I've already set up a Shen gathering technique in this trial palace. No matter if it's you or them in the trial palace, in the end, all the Shen energy in your body will belong to me. As for how far I can break through to the human profound realm, I don't know myself. In this case, you've helped an absolute Shen cultivator. Are you still happy?" Everyone thought in their hearts that this was shameless, but now that their dantian had been absorbed by the Shen gathering technique, they could only accept this guy's endless humiliation. At this moment, the sect master of the Jin City sect released his hand and jumped lightly to the top of the trial palace that was hovering in the air. Now, no one could escape from his grasp. He sat down with peace of mind and absorbed the Shen energy that the trial palace brought to him. Shameful. Sect master, forget about them. Why don't you even let us go? The few people of the Jin City sect were very puzzled. Why was their sect master so vicious that he even wanted to absorb their Shen energy? Jin City laughed out loud. Chapter 652. He said indifferently, "If you all don't participate, how can they be fooled? The most important thing is that although the profound strength in your bodies is not much, it is still a part of the profound strength, isn't it?" She listened to his crazy thoughts. All the elders roared, but there was nothing they could do. Right now, they had no way to leave the Great Array. Moreover, if it wasn't for the remaining profound strength that could be used to protect their main heart meridians, they would have died long ago because of being sucked dry. What was laughable was that after Jin Cheng finished absorbing, they might not even be able to keep this little bit of profound strength. But Sect Master, if you do this, our Jin Cheng will be exterminated. Jin Cheng immediately laughed out loud. How can it be so easy to exterminate a sect? There are no more elders, just use profound stones to recruit more. There are no more inner sect disciples, just choose from the outer sect. Jiyu also felt that it was a little strange in the training palace. She didn't know if it was because of the mystery of the palace or because of the loss of profound strength in her body. He could feel that his profound strength was constantly flowing away, and it wouldn't stop. If it wasn't for the fact that his strength was strong, he was afraid that he would only be left with the strength of the spirit profound realm. It seemed that he had to pass as soon as possible. Look! A door of light appeared in the air. It seemed that whoever entered the door of light first would be able to obtain the most points. The face of the 5 great sects was completely torn apart in the face of this final challenge. They looked at each other. The disciples of the Imperial Sword sect were the first to lose their patience. They threw out their own treasured weapons, profound swords, and stabbed them into the ground. In the blink of an eye, their bodies seemed to be attracted by the treasured weapons, and directly flew towards the treasured weapons. Ridiculous! More than a dozen huge men revealed a disdainful smile. Their bodies instantly disappeared from where they were, and when they reappeared, it was as if they had seen something. When they reappeared, they had already arrived beside the treasured weapons. How can there be such a fast speed? The disciples of the Imperial Sword sect didn't understand either. They only saw the men smile slightly. We, the Ancient Spirit sect, have profound beasts since we were young. Now, it's just a small trick. They stood beside the Imperial Sword faction's great treasure and put their hands together. A huge chi aura leisurely came out of their bodies and directly shrouded their bodies. A look of disdain appeared on their faces. The disciples of the Imperial Sword faction directly collided with the chi aura released by the Imperial Sword faction. How about it? Now that you don't have a prized artifact, I want to see how you can break through our defense. The leader laughed and then ordered the disciple who had been hiding behind him to open the light door. The disciples of the other 4 sects were naturally unhappy. The 10 or so female disciples of the fallen immortal faction moved at the same time. The treasures in their hands were long crutches. Speaking of which, it was strange. These crutches swung forward. It actually had the momentum of splitting open the heavens. A loud boom was heard. The Qi gang dispersed abruptly. The disciples of the sword-controlling sect were not fools. They extended their sword fingers. All he said was, "Sword, come." In the blink of an eye, those treasures rose from the ground and flew in their direction. However, those treasures were all blocked by the Ancient Spirit faction. The Imperial Sword faction wanted to use this opportunity to kill all the so-called Ancient Spirit faction in front of them. Even if they couldn't kill you, they could at least injure you, right? They were secretly scheming in their hearts. Those long swords shot in their direction one after another. Although the disciples of the Ancient Spirit faction were a little flustered, they didn't completely lose their minds. They roared and stomped on the ground. His originally glossy skull actually seemed to emit a trace of golden light. They stomped on the ground, accompanied by the violent shaking of the sky. All of them turned into golden people. Those treasures didn't hurt or itch at all when they collided with their bodies. The eldest disciple of the Ancient Spirit faction raised his head proudly and said arrogantly, "You Imperial Sword faction and the disciples of the fallen immortal sect, so what if you join forces? Do you still want to hurt us?" While speaking, they suddenly heard the sound of violent wind coming from their ears. They immediately looked to the side, only to see a huge iron hammer coming at them with a loud bang. They all took 2 steps back, only to see a group of people who had been silent all this while move. They waved the iron hammers in their hands and heavily smashed them on their bodies. It was accompanied by a scream. They fell to the ground one after another, touching their chests. Looking at the group of people in front of them, they couldn't help but have a trace of evil thoughts in their hearts. How could the Ancient Spirit faction's golden body profound skill allow them to maintain a super strong defensive ability for 3 minutes? Even experts at the peak of the 3rd level of the human profound realm couldn't do anything to them in a short time. But after these 3 minutes, they would be in danger. Originally, they thought that this was just the last stage of the trial, so they took out their trump cards in advance. But they never thought that they would be so vulnerable in front of the other party. They only saw a group of people waving their iron hammers and didn't say much nonsense. They just divided into 3 groups and attacked Jiyu and the others. Although the fallen immortal sect was known for their dexterity, in front of these big iron hammers, they were still defeated. Even their own protective artifacts were shattered by these big iron hammers. Seeing this outside the trial palace, the Gold City faction's leader was very excited. "Old Iron Hammer, I have long known that your faction uses strength to break through everything, but I didn't expect it to be so powerful. Shameless, my Iron Hammer Profound sect naturally leads a faction." The Gold City faction's leader coldly snorted, "You are the leader, yet you still don't know. You actually dare to provoke this faction's leader. If it wasn't for the fact that I haven't completely absorbed your profound strength, this old man would have killed you long ago." The old Iron Hammer was not to be outdone. He just sneered and said, "So what if you kill us? Killing us is just to show how strong you are. If you kill us, you won't be able to suppress the 9th level Profound Beast in this trial palace. When the Profound Beast appears, you will also die." The Gold City faction's leader laughed, "I didn't expect it. Did you cultivate your brains? Why do you believe everything this faction's leader says? There are no Profound Beasts in here at all. I just added a layer of seal inside. As long as they can pass, they will enter my seal." Chapter 653. Facing life and death, the sect leaders of the 4 sects did not hesitate. Thus, they began to curse one after another. "You're really shameless. For the sake of Shen energy, you won't even let go of your own disciples. In this life, this old man only has one son, but he died at the hands of your magnificent Saint Profound sect. Now, this old man just wants an explanation from you. What does this count as? Then what about us? We haven't offended you. H, you boast that you're a third-rate sect in the union of 10,000 immortals and feel complacent. Now, why are you begging for mercy in front of our 4th-rate sect?" Anyway, scolding was one thing. The current Jin City only felt that he was very happy. It seemed that this was the peak of his life. Thinking of this in his heart, he suddenly laughed out loud. Looking at this shameless villain, they clenched their fists. "Wait for this old man to suck your Shen energy dry, then I'll play with your fallen immortal sect. Each of you fairies is young and beautiful. I don't know how long this old man has been thinking. With Shen energy to absorb and beauties to be my mount, ha ha ha. My life has reached this point. Even if I can't break through the life and death realm in this life, I should be satisfied." The fallen immortal sect's sect leader's face turned red from his words. Since they entered the sect, they had never suffered such humiliation. Moreover, to have more than 100 female disciples serve a man, an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years, this was simply wishful thinking. But now, they had no choice but to lower their arrogant heads. The key was that when their sect recruited disciples, all of them, starting from the sect leader, had to be virgins. Now, how did they fall into his hands? With a sigh, the fallen immortal sect's sect leader had the intention to die. Perhaps sensing her thoughts, the Jin City sect's sect leader said, "Don't think about suicide. Your Shen energy has been sucked dry by me. At most, you'll be reduced to mortals. But if you dare to commit suicide, this old man will gather all of your 3 souls and 7 spirits. Every day, I'll use fire and ice to make you beg for death." After saying this, everyone no longer had the intention to die. On the other side, Jiyu's warhound great sword fell heavily. With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the Iron Hammer Profound sect's protective artifact. Even though they knew that their treasures were only of the 7th grade, they knew that their treasures were only of the 7th grade. However, the artifact itself was made of the best black iron. Logically speaking, even a 10th grade artifact would be intimidated by it. How could it be broken so easily? Could it be that Jiyu's artifact had already surpassed theirs? After guessing to this point, they could not help but have the intention to kill and steal the treasures. Although they knew that outside of the training palace, there would be the sect leaders and elders of the 5 great sects. But what if they killed Jiyu and said that it was an accident? Every time there was a 5 profound gathering, wouldn't it be normal for a few people to die? After making up his mind, The person who was fighting with Ji suddenly shouted, "Give up on the opponent in front of you and help me take him down." After shouting this sentence, the remaining people, although they did not know why their senior brother shouted like this, they secretly thought that this person had some ability. It was no wonder that their senior brother could not deal with him. They gave up on the Gold City sect's disciples in front of them. Those disciples still wanted to resist, but they just smashed down with their hammers. How could these inner disciples resist the other side's direct disciples? It could be assumed that the direct disciples were the people that the elders of the various sects wanted to pass on all their skills to. Sure enough, after they were struck by this profound skill, they all retreated explosively. They even spat out a mouthful of blood. The remaining Iron Hammer sect's disciples gathered together with that disciple. They all rushed towards Jiu's direction. Jiu smiled faintly. Ignorant. Looking at the unchanging expression on Jiu's face, they were naturally delighted. In a battle between profound practitioners, the most dreadful thing was to underestimate one's opponent. Now that Jiu had delivered herself to them, they could not wait for Jiu to look down on them. Thinking of this, they directly rushed towards Jiu's direction. Spinning his body, the big hammer in his hand became even more powerful. It was as if there was a gust of wind. Unexpectedly, a tornado appeared on the spot where he was standing. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they were all shocked and their mouths were wide open. How is this possible? What a strong fusion, profound skill. Although the people from the other two sects were pressured by the Iron Hammer sect in front of them to the point that they could not breathe. However, they did not face such a predicament. They raised their heads and were extremely shocked. As for the remaining Iron Hammer sect's disciples, they had a disdainful smile on their faces. Kill, kill, kill. After shouting out these words, Yi Zichen shouted out. The hurricane attacked Jiu's direction. Looking at the power of the hurricane, it was probably at the first level of the spirit profound realm. If it was the Jiu from yesterday, perhaps she would have a trace of fear. However, in today's Jiu's eyes, it was simply trash. Ding, the host used Fierce Wind Blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. The Fierce Wind Blade struck towards their bodies, causing them to abruptly take 2 steps back. They could only see the 2 hurricanes colliding in a short moment. It seemed that they would not be able to determine who was up and who was down in a short period of time. The corner of Jiu's mouth slightly smiled. They did not seem to understand what it was, but their bodies had already controlled the big hammer to enter the hurricane. They only felt that the 2 hurricanes had merged together. However, under normal circumstances, they were like the eye of the storm. There would not be any problems. However, right now, they felt as if they were heavily slapped in the face by someone. Because within the hurricane, it was as if there were countless blades that were scraping their flesh. However, this kind of pain went straight to their souls. There was not a single trace of injury on their bodies. Their hearts became more and more anxious. What should they do? What should they do? Among them, one of the smarter ones shouted, "His profound skill requires the use of artifacts. Why don't we just directly break his artifact? Let's see how arrogant he can be." When everyone heard this, they felt that this was the best method out of all possible methods. Thinking of this, they controlled their bodies and directly charged towards Jiu. The corner of Jiu's mouth revealed a disdainful smile. They only saw her gently raise one hand and the warhound's great sword in her hand suddenly struck out. A loud rumbling sound rang out. Suddenly, the 2 forces collided with each other in an instant, and a huge mysterious light shone. Chapter 654. The corner of Jiu's mouth revealed a trace of an evil smile. The 4 of them charged forward and their target was Jiu's warhound's greatsword. He did not panic and just threw the warhound's greatsword away. 5 types of inherited Shen energy suddenly reinforced it. The people of Iron Hammer sect panicked. But the arrow on the bow had to be released. They gritted their teeth and concentrated all of their Shen Qi into their long swords. With a heavy swing of their swords, a loud rumbling sound rang out. Jiu's warhound's greatsword safely returned to Jiu's hand. As for the Iron Hammer sect's hammers, They all shattered without exception. Ji fell to the ground and waved his hand, creating a gale. Ding, the host used Fierce Wind Blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. The difference between the two sides was decided in an instant. Ji said indifferently, "You lost." In the blink of an eye, the Fierce Wind Blade appeared and posed a huge threat to them. When they saw Ji's cold eyes, their hearts suddenly trembled. He said indifferently, "If you put down the artifact now, I can still let you go." The people of Iron Hammer sect looked at each other and said indifferently, "What do we do? What else can we do? Brothers, let's attack together and kill him." Yes, the artifact in his hand is a rare artifact. Only by taking the artifact in his hand can we stop him from being so powerful. Hearing this, for some reason, Ji had the urge to laugh. He smiled faintly and raised his hand. Suddenly, the Warhound's greatsword in his hand disappeared without a trace. The people of Iron Hammer sect were instantly enraged. "You actually dare to look down on us? Preposterous, die." The people who were fighting with the other sects all retreated and looked at the arrogant kid in front of them. They smiled faintly. "Although our Iron Hammer sect's Shen skills are not the most powerful, the strength in our hands is not something that anyone can look down on." After shouting this sentence, everyone looked at each other. The artifacts in their hands suddenly flew out. Everyone grabbed the hammers in their hands and ran towards Ji's direction. When they saw this scene, the remaining people surrounded Ji. They raised the hammers in their hands and threw them in Ji's direction. At this moment, Ji disappeared from where he was. His body was burning with a raging fire. It burned the hammer and showed signs of melting it. They anxiously took a step back, and in the blink of an eye, Ji suddenly ran 2 to 3 steps forward and raised the armor in his hand. At this moment, the flames on his body became stronger and stronger. The flames on his body appeared on Ji's fingertips. With a thought from Ji, the flames left Ji's sword fingers and flew out like missiles. With a boom, the people of Iron Hammer sect were blown up and not a single one of them was left. On top of that, Ji's killing intent had been aroused. Without exception, the hammers in their hands were all swallowed up by the flames in Ji's hand. Ji said faintly, "Now you're obedient." After witnessing Ji's terrifying strength, how could they have the guts to enter the door of light? They looked at each other and opened up a path for Ji. When Ji saw this scene, he slowly walked forward and arrived in front of the door of light. Within the door of light, a number array flashed. He didn't expect that such profound knowledge would exist in this small world of Shen cultivators. It was only the multiplication method. How could it be difficult for Ji? However, at this moment, a trace of vigilance appeared in Ji's heart. He glanced at the people beside him and said to the disciples of Gold City, "Come forward and see if you can break the mechanism on the door." That person took a step forward and saw the multiplication table on the door. He couldn't help but laugh. This is such a simple problem for mortals. How can we not know how to solve it? When he heard this, Ji felt that things weren't that simple. With the mentality that it was better to let others die than to die, Ji grabbed a disciple of Iron Hammer sect and asked him to solve the problem. The disciple of Iron Hammer sect sneered. Perhaps it was because the past master saw that it was the last test, so he naturally relaxed his vigilance. Or perhaps it was because he wanted the 5 great sects to fight each other. Considering that the final victor would definitely not have any Shen Qi left, what would he use to open the door? Therefore, he used such a simple method to seal it. This Ji was still stupid enough to think that no one could open the door, or that there was something strange behind the door. He was simply stupid to the extreme. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but smile and walk forward. Under the door plate, he easily moved the numbers on the mechanism. When the problems were solved one by one, the door opened. Congratulations to all of you for passing the test. The one who opened the door will enter first and obtain the highest score. The rest of you will enter in order and leave the training palace. The disciple of Iron Hammer sect laughed. He glanced at Ji complacently. However, he couldn't defeat Ji, so he didn't dare to mock him. After all, there was nothing to say when one's skill was inferior. Ji smiled faintly and gestured for them to enter. Although he had given the opportunity to win this round, it wasn't the time to find out who was stronger and who was weaker. He waved his hand faintly. Immediately, everyone entered the door in a frenzy. Jiyu also followed the crowd into the door. When he saw a flash of brilliance, Jiyu shouted in his heart. If it was any other time, Jiyu would understand that this was just a small trap. However, Jiyu had already entered this trap. It would definitely trigger a tremor in heaven and earth. When he thought of this, he sighed slightly. When the people next to him saw Jiyu, they sighed as well. Brother Jiyu, may I ask what happened to you? The person who spoke was from the Imperial Sword Sect. Although their skill was inferior, they didn't directly attack Jiyu and the others. Now, they could still restore the friendship between the various sects. Jiyu smiled slightly. You don't know. This is a conspiracy. It's a formation. Moreover, we are all trapped in this formation. There's no way to break it from the inside. Chapter 655. What? We don't have a way to break it from the inside. When they heard Jiyu's words, their hearts trembled slightly. If this continued, wouldn't they be spending the rest of their lives here? Hearing this, the first to break down was the Ancient Spirit Clan. Their Ancient Spirit Clan was the clan closest to the top clans. Now, as the most outstanding disciples of this clan, they were trapped here. When they thought of this, they took the lead and took a step forward. Junior brothers, you are the best at learning array formations among us. Come and give it a try. After saying this, everyone looked at each other and nodded one after another. Okay, I promise you. After saying this, everyone took a step forward. Their eyes were full of blood. They released the dark force in their bodies and poured it into the array. They only saw that the array suddenly emitted a bright light. Before they could find the array core of the array, the profound energy in their bodies had already been sucked dry. They couldn't help but gasp. In an instant, all the dark force in their bodies was sucked dry. They couldn't help but tremble. Jiyu said indifferently, "Give up." Several disciples of the Jincheng faction collapsed in their hearts. They sat directly on the ground and burst into tears. Jiyu frowned and asked, "What's there to cry about?" After hearing Jiyu's words, the rest of the people cried even harder. They cried and said, "We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. Why do you say that? It wasn't easy for us to pass so many tests. Why can't we go back?" Jiyu laughed again. How could they be so ignorant? He said indifferently, "Do you think that these tests were made by your master? Isn't it?" Their small eyes were filled with incredulity. How could this matter be fake? They looked at each other. Jiyu said indifferently, "That might be the case in the beginning. However, this array formation is able to suck away all of our profound energy. One look and I can tell that it's not a good array formation. I believe it's to suck away all of our profound energy. And once the dark force is sucked dry, there's no way to replenish it. It's just a small trial. How could it be so vicious?" When they heard that Jiyu understood all the key points, they immediately understood. Jiyu said faintly, "If that's the case, then it's up to me." He pulled out the warhound's sword and stabbed it into the ground. The dark force directly passed through the sword and into the ground. Seeing this scene, he said indifferently, "Come out." The dark force kept coming from the ground. Outside the trial palace, everyone's dark force was being sucked away by the Gold City sect master. He laughed out loud and looked like he was enjoying it. Especially the young disciples inside. If their dark force was transferred to their bodies, who knew what kind of scene it would be? When they thought of this, their hearts were suddenly filled with joy. He said with a faint smile, "Just obediently accept your deaths." At this moment, the air suddenly shook. Jiyu had found the array core. "I need someone to protect my body." After saying this, he closed his eyes. Everyone naturally knew who Jiyu was referring to. Now that everyone was in trouble, how could anyone destroy Jiyu's body? Thinking of this, they all came in front of Jiyu and slowly blocked Jiyu's body. When he saw the Gold City sect, Fairy Ruelan, and the others standing in front of Jiyu to protect her, he felt relieved and closed his eyes. No one knew that Ji-yu still had a life-saving treasure in her body. Once someone had the intention to kill him, the 18 golden puppets would definitely appear. In addition, the 5 great sects would be fighting each other, so he would definitely be able to escape unscathed. With this thought in mind, Ji-yu's soul walked out of the cave. She went through the warhound's sword and entered the ground. The 3 divine beasts were like Ji-yu's most obedient children. The weapon spirits of other sects' weapons were mainly in human form. Only Ji-yu's artifact spirit was like an obedient and terrifying Shen beast. He wondered if those grandmasters who forged treasured artifacts would change their worldview after hearing this news. He said faintly, "Do you understand human language?" The dark beasts raised their heads and nodded, indicating that they could understand what Ji-yu was saying. "Today, I'll bring you back to glory." After saying this, the 3 Shen beasts entered the ground one after another. Presumably, such a profound array would definitely have a treasure as the core of the array. And this treasure would be the best food for the tool spirit. All the Shen beasts' eyes shone with a trace of light. Ji-yu brought them underground, only to see that the wind around them was howling. He said faintly, "Do you see what we're looking for?" The long snake took the lead and flew out, wandering around the area. The giant tiger did not dare to fall behind. The souls of the giant dog and the rhinoceros were already flying around. Ji-yu smiled faintly and said, "It seems that you won't be able to find it either." He recalled that although the array required a treasure as the eye of the array, if he needed to find the most powerful thing in the world when facing the array, he would need to find the best location. In other words, he had to go underground. He kept flying towards the ground, only to see layers of earth and rocks appearing in front of him. He sneered and pulled out the long sword in front of him. He swung it out and all the earth and rocks disappeared. Then, he came to a sea of fire. The sea of fire forced the 3 weapon spirits to stay close to Ji-yu. It was too hot. Ji-yu's mouth revealed a disdainful smile. "Fire, is it?" The fire inheritance in his body started to move. The endless sea of fire kept entering Ji-yu's body. Ding, the host has activated the fire inheritance. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. As the system's voice kept ringing, the sea of fire kept increasing Ji-yu's dark force. With the addition of these 2 things, the fire inheritance broke through to the 3rd level of the spirit profound realm. Chapter 656. The sea of fire gradually decreased under Ji-yu's absorption. In the next moment, it was all integrated into Ji-yu's body. Ji-yu suddenly opened her eyes wide and said lightly, "Absorb." After shouting this sentence, the large sea of fire instantly integrated into Ji-yu's body. In the blink of an eye, Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. Ji-yu pulled out a flame and heavily bombarded the ground below. After a loud bang, Ji-yu flew down. Suddenly, a long roar was heard. The corners of Ji-yu's mouth curled into a smile. "It's out, it's out." He was filled with joy in his heart. This was the artifact spirit of the artifact. They would only attack Ji-yu directly, but the warhound's great sword in Ji-yu's hand would directly tear them apart. After thinking of this, Ji-yu waved her hand heavily. The 3 giant beasts were even crazier than Ji-yu. They gathered together and charged directly at Ji-yu. The 3 Shen beasts saw a huge figure. He let out a roar. They raised their heads and roared heavily. Even if they had become weapon spirits, they could not tolerate any threat, especially from their own kind. After being roared at like this, they all raised their heads and roared out in anger. That loud voice turned out to be the Kuan Peng. Ji-yu was stunned. She did not expect that it would become like this. The 4 Shen beasts had already merged together and started fighting. Ji-yu retreated to one side and watched them fight. In the next moment, the Kuan Peng suddenly opened its bloody mouth. Then, its big mouth came in front of Ji-yu and the others. Ji-yu smiled contemptuously and turned around, only to see it suddenly raise its hand. At this moment, the 3 giant beasts in front of her were directly swallowed by the Kuan Peng. Ji-yu did not expect that the Kuan Peng would swallow them in an instant. Ji-yu frowned and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, she came in front of the other party. Ji Yu raised her hand and the soul power in her body was instantly released to the extreme. The flame directly wrapped around Ji Yu's fists. She wildly hammered in the direction of the Kuan Peng. At this moment, the Kuan Peng kept flapping its wings, but under Ji Yu's crazy attack, the Kuan Peng did not have any strength to fight back. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ji Yu directly raised her hand and punched out. Boom, boom, boom. With 3 loud sounds, the Kuan Peng fell into the sea of fire in an instant. Ji Yu raised her hand. If Ji Yu was in the array, she could clearly see that the huge warhound's sword that was inserted into the ground shook violently at this moment. The long sword began to tremble uncontrollably. At this moment, the long sword let out a roar and flew down in the next moment. With 2 bangs, the people on both sides crazily collided with each other. Ji Yu raised her hand and a Xian energy enveloped the Kuan Peng. The Kuan Peng could not move. Perhaps only it knew that Ji Yu wanted to use it as the next weapon spirit. At this moment, it roared and directly rushed in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu snorted and slowly raised her hand. He turned into a beam of white light and arrived in front of Ji Yu in the blink of an eye. Ji Yu immediately extended his hand and swung it. Even if the Kuan Peng wanted to leave, it could not escape from Ji Yu's hand. Under the Xian light, its body gradually became smaller and smaller. Finally, it turned into a small ball of light in Ji Yu's hand. He said lightly, "Let's see if you are convinced or not." He saw that the treasure weapon below was fighting with Ji Yu for control of the treasure weapon. Ji Yu frowned, and in the time it took to turn around, it flew down. She said lightly, "Damn it." After saying that, the treasure appeared in front of Ji Yu. It was a small silver basin. Ji Yu snorted coldly. His hands formed a sword and stabbed into the silver basin. Following a loud catcher sound, the silver basin split into 2 in an instant. There was no way for the weapon spirit to possess the silver treasure. The weapon spirit flew up directly and roared as if the 9 heavens were about to tremble. It directly rushed in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu raised her hand and saw the Kuan Peng's figure shrink again. Now it was just in the shape of a little bird. It was still flapping its wings continuously. Ji Yu flew behind the little bird and by the time he arrived in front of it, it had already returned to its original position before the astral projection. The surrounding people came forward one after another. They drew their long swords and surrounded Ji Yu and the others. Ji Yu snorted and forced the Kuan Peng into the giant sword. In an instant, the giant sword flew into Ji Yu's hand and Ji Yu pulled it out. Fairy Ruolan spat out a mouthful of blood and fell into a pool of blood. Ji Yu came forward and helped her up. She said lightly, "Who hurt you like this?" After hearing Ji Yu's question, Fairy Ruolan raised her hand and pointed at the iron hammer sect in front of her. Ji Yu looked at them coldly and said, "You're courting death." They scoffed. Now that the trial is over, it seems like Fairy Ruolan might die. When we get out later, all we have to do is say that you were the one who killed her. The Gold City sect leader alone will be able to kill all of you. Ji Yu smiled faintly. "You'll have to be alive to get out of here alive first." As she spoke, Ji Yu put a pill into her mouth. After swallowing the pill, a trace of golden light appeared in her eyes and she slowly floated up. She raised her hand and in an instant, Fairy Ruolan's aura gradually became stronger. Ji Yu said indifferently, "It's time for you to be on your way." After saying this, Ji Yu locked her gaze on them. Ji Yu waved the giant sword in her hand. Suddenly, a giant Kuan Peng flew out from her sword. Although the giant sword had already fused with Ji Yu's hand, it was still in her hand. After seeing the Kuan Peng, everyone in front of her trembled. Chapter 657. The Kuan Peng's size stunned everyone present. The Warhound's greatsword in Ji Yu's hand had been completely renamed as the Kuan Peng sword. The weapon spirit that had fused with the 4 Xian beasts was incomparably powerful. The people of the profound Iron Hammer sect wanted to take advantage of the time when Ji Yu's body was separated from his body to take his life. They didn't expect that several large sects would protect him. Forget about that. After Ji Yu woke up, it was as if he had changed into a different person. A heavy sword was swung out. Suddenly, a tsunami of Xian Qi swarmed over. What was even more terrifying was that his weapon spirit was actually the Kuan Peng. The Kuan Peng spread its wings and covered the sky. In an instant, it covered the entire trial palace. Even the people in the trial palace could feel this terrifying Xian Qi. A loud rumbling sound rang out. The people of the profound Iron Hammer sect fell into a pool of blood. The trial palace also collapsed. The Gold City sect's sect master flew out and landed in an absolutely safe position. Without the trial palace's restriction, the sect masters and elders of the various sects regained their freedom. They looked at Ji Yu's direction with vigilance. Unfortunately, Ji Yu had been out for too long. Their Xian Qi had long been absorbed by the trial palace. I didn't expect you to be able to come out. The Gold City sect's sect master's eyes were sharp, as if he wanted to see through the youth in front of him. How strong is he? How can he break my array? The profound Iron Hammer sect's sect master was heartbroken. My good disciple. He crazily threw himself on the group of corpses on the ground as tears kept flowing out of his eyes. Ji Yu lightly asked, "Who is the sacred profound sect's sect master?" An old man wearing a red robe slowly stood up. He stroked his beard and said with a sage-like appearance, "This old man is the sacred profound sect's sect master." Ji Yu walked in front of him. "How do I enter the extreme north?" As soon as he finished speaking, all the sect masters present who knew about that matter looked in Ji Yu's direction in disbelief. How did he know about this matter? All of a sudden, a trace of doubt appeared in everyone's hearts. Ji Yu said indifferently, "You don't need to know how I know. I just need to know how to get in." Ji Yu's human profound realm strength was fully released, suppressing everyone's head. The sect leader of the flourishing Saint Profound sect was completely crushed by this terrifying profound energy. He said faintly, "All right, whatever you say." Ji Yu pulled back her hand. With a loud rumble, dark clouds suddenly covered the sky, and countless bolts of lightning fell. What a powerful profound energy! I want your profound energy. The head of the Jincheng sect suddenly laughed out loud. Dozens of flags flew out of his hand and floated in the sky. He gently pointed his finger. The 10 flags shone with a golden color. In the blink of an eye, they had already surrounded Ji Yu. The profound energy in Ji Yu's body flowed like the sea to the head of the Jincheng sect. He closed his eyes tightly and didn't move. He just looked at her as if she was an ant that was about to die. The head of the Jincheng sect was shocked. Why is this kid looking at me like this? What is he thinking? The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. He didn't know what Ji Yu was up to. He only knew that in his heart, the fear of Ji Yu was getting stronger and stronger. He couldn't bear this torture anymore, so he just increased the output of profound energy in his hand. Another wave of frightening profound energy pressure slowly descended. Ji Yu snorted disdainfully, "Absorb, let's see how much you can absorb." In fact, it wasn't that Ji Yu didn't know this kind of profound skill that absorbed people's profound energy. It was just that she didn't use it rarely. She was also interested to see where the limit of her opponent was. The head of the Jincheng sect had already absorbed all the profound energy of Ji Yu's fire inheritance. But when he saw Ji Yu's body was still erupting with powerful profound energy. I didn't expect this guy to have such a terrifying profound energy. He has inherited more than 2 powers of inheritance. What? Even in our ancient Xian lineage, this is extremely rare. How is his small body able to contain the power of 2 inheritances? The heads of several sects started to discuss with each other. Although they knew clearly that if Ji Yu couldn't defeat the head of the Jincheng sect in front of her today, then she would face the problem of life and death. They were satisfied to be able to see such a peerless genius before they died. Ji Yu looked at the head of the Jincheng sect in front of her with disdain. The sky-splitting mysterious skill in her body had been running continuously, and the cultivation method became more and more powerful. The head of the Jincheng sect was suddenly frightened. "This guy, why can't I absorb it dry? Don't you have 2 powers of inheritance? I'll just absorb it." After making up his mind, the head of the Jincheng sect increased the absorption power of the profound skill in his hand. The second powers of inheritance was also absorbed completely. But along with it, there was a third: powers of inheritance. All the heads of the sects saw it. Ji couldn't be described as a genius anymore. She was simply a monster, a complete monster. Impossible, impossible. The head of the Jincheng sect looked at Ji with fear in his eyes. The third: powers of inheritance, was absorbed completely. The fourth. How can a person accommodate 4 powers of inheritance? No matter, now the arrow is on the string, I have to shoot. The fifth: powers of inheritance. Is this guy still human? And each of the powers of inheritance was at the second tier of the human profound realm. This is really terrifying. After thinking of this in his heart, he suddenly said, "Kid, who are you?" "I'm just a profound practitioner." Damn, who doesn't know that their mother is a woman? After Ji's fifth power of inheritance had been sucked dry, his body continued to explode with powerful profound energy. Ding! The host used the sky-splitting technique and gained 1 by 999 experience points. The voice of the system kept ringing in Ji's ears. And in the face of the sky-splitting technique, which could accommodate endless profound strength between heaven and earth, the head of the Jincheng sect couldn't absorb the profound strength in Ji's body no matter how hard he tried. This is really too scary. Ji suddenly raised her hand and said, "If you want it, I'll give it to you." After saying this, the profound strength in Ji's body was filled again. All of a sudden, all 5 powers of inheritance were replenished. Seeing this scene, not to mention the head of the Jincheng sect, even everyone present was stunned. Chapter 658. After saying that, Ji's sky-splitting mysterious skill was activated to the extreme. Although the Gold City sect leader wanted to withdraw his Shen energy, it was already too late. There was no way to withdraw the Shen energy in his hand. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. The Shen energy in his hand was gradually released in an instant. He didn't expect that Ji's Shen skill would be so powerful. "I can't absorb it anymore. I can't absorb it anymore." The Gold City sect leader thought crazily in his heart. This strength was simply too terrifying. He shouted loudly and pulled out his precious weapon. With a heavy wave of his hand, his arm was instantly broken. An arm fell to the ground. He gasped for breath and said, "Kid, you have guts." Ji smiled faintly and said, "A strong man breaks his arm. The Gold City sect leader is so bold. Originally, you and I got along fine. I just wanted to know the way to the polar region, but you didn't have eyes. Then I will kindly accept your Shen skill." Ding! The host used the Shen absorption skill. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. The Gold City sect leader's body floated up. The Shen energy that he absorbed from the crowd and from Ji all returned to Ji. Not only that, the original Shen energy in his body was also constantly being absorbed. How was this possible? No wonder that kid was not afraid of him at all. It turned out that he also had such a powerful Shen skill. He looked at Ji in horror and watched as the muscles on his body gradually dried up. The Shen energy in his body was also sucked dry by Ji. He said faintly, "I lost. If I didn't take the initiative to provoke you, I wouldn't have ended up like this." Ji nodded without hesitation. To be honest, the life and death of the 5 great Shen sects had nothing to do with Ji. He deserved to die for offending her. When all the profound energy in his body had been completely absorbed by Ji, he sat on the ground and started crying. He had never expected that after painstakingly researching for his entire life, he would get this one chance and he would succeed. However, the profound energy in his body had also been sucked dry. When he thought of this, he inexplicably felt incomparably wronged. He even felt like crying, but there was no way for tears to appear. This was because the suction force from Ji's body was countless times stronger than the cultivation technique he obtained in the secret realm. In the blink of an eye, the profound energy in his body completely disappeared. When he landed on the ground, his eyes began to turn white, and his body disappeared from this world like dust. Seeing Ji's terrifying strength, everyone's hearts began to tremble. Ji took a step forward and said calmly, "Sect leader of Shengsheng, it's time to hand over the secret passage." The sect leader of Shengsheng sighed. If he didn't want to die now, he could only obey obediently. However, there was a trace of unwillingness in his heart. Why did our lives have to be in the hands of someone like her? He sighed and took out a sect leader's token. He threw it into Ji-Yu's hands. After receiving the token, he said calmly, "The entrance to the secret passage is in the secret chamber of the Sheng sect." Originally, this token was held by each of the 5 great sects, but now, the sect leader of Jin City's token is also in your hands, right? The remaining sect leaders did not dare to be careless. They all took out their tokens and handed them to Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu cupped her hands and thanked them. Then, she took out a bottle of medicine and threw it to the sect leaders. Fairy Ruolan looked at the handsome Ji-Yu, and her heart suddenly bloomed like a flower. He was so handsome and so powerful. Wouldn't he be able to reach the peak of the Shen sect in the future? The elders of the Jin City sect also saw this. They all knelt on the ground and said, "Young Master Ji-Yu, please take over the Jin City sect." Ji-Yu glanced at the token in his hand. It was a good idea, so he agreed. There were countless mystical skills here. Ji-Yu could learn them all with just a glance. When the elders saw that Ji-Yu had such a strong learning ability, they suddenly felt that it was not a big deal even if their powers were not restored. With Ji-Yu around, the day of Jin Cheng's revival would be tomorrow. Ji-Yu sat on a mystical beast. He needed to go to the extreme north of the Shen sect. Now, he only needed to go to 2 more subhalls to revive the Ice Queen. Of course, Ji-Yu did not tell anyone about this. They thought that Ji-Yu wanted to go there to get the treasure. They had gone there before and even defeated the people who lived there all year round. Only the guardians who were in deep sleep underground had not awakened. However, this was not important anymore. They were now useless. When they returned, the disciples who survived the trial palace would be able to take over the positions of the elders. The carriage shook continuously. After 2 months, they finally arrived at the territory of the Shen sect. It was indeed the territory of the Shen sect. This place had already developed into a small city formation. Ji-Yu raised her head and looked forward. Hundreds of people descended from the sky. They immediately surrounded Ji-Yu and knelt at the feet of the sect leader who was beside her. "Welcome back, Holy Lord." The sect leader of the Shen sect walked out of the carriage and said calmly, "Everyone, please rise." When everyone saw that their sect leader did not have any trace of mystical energy on him, they were very curious. Could it be that their sect leader had broken through? Who would have thought that what made everyone surprised was, after the sect leader returned, he immediately announced that he was no longer the sect leader of the Shen sect and handed over everything to his successor disciple. Everyone was very surprised. However, their strength was not as powerful as the successor disciple, so they did not dare to say much. After meeting their surprised gazes, the sect leader of the Shen sect brought Ji-Yu to a huge stone at the back of the mountain. They only saw that the stone was shining with a golden light, as if it was the most wonderful existence between heaven and earth. He made a gesture of invitation. Ji-Yu took a step forward and gently placed her palm on it. A golden light completely lit up. The stone emitted a golden light. The 5 tokens on her body all floated up. This golden light attracted the attention of the entire Shen sect. What kind of mysterious existence was this? He cupped his hands and said to Ji-Yu, "This old man has no more mystical energy now, so I can't accompany you in." Ji-Yu nodded and stepped forward into the golden light. In the blink of an eye, Ji-Yu disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in another big world. Chapter 659. Unexpectedly, the snow started to flutter in the air, only to see the snow fluttering down. But that didn't happen. The cold wind suddenly blew at this moment. The falling snow was more than 3 feet long. Ji-Yu looked coldly in front of him, his heart turning cold. He had just taken a step forward. The snowflakes suddenly fell in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu instantly disappeared from where she was and ran forward. The surrounding snowflakes were all around her. At this moment, the air froze. Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot in the blink of an eye. But the snow froze Ji-Yu's Qi-gang in an instant. Ji-Yu's dark force was activated to the maximum, and the power of the flame covered Ji-Yu's body. The flames continued to spread. He reached out and waved his hand gently. In an instant, the flame gradually turned its head. There was a flame floating in the air. At this moment, the ground suddenly shook. A giant beast that was more than 10 feet tall appeared from the ground. The giant beast locked its eyes on Ji-Yu. Roar! The giant beast let out a furious roar and charged in Ji-Yu's direction. Ji-Yu raised his hand. Suddenly, the giant beast pounced in front of Ji-Yu. The flame slowly fell and blocked in front of Ji-Yu. The flame collided with the Qi-gang. With a loud bang, Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot in the blink of an eye. He took a step back. Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot in the blink of an eye. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, the giant beast ran out. It leaped and flew in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu suddenly raised his hand and blocked in front of him. The giant beast kept retreating. It roared twice and moved slightly. At this moment, the human and the giant beast were crazily punching each other. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, they were all sent flying backward. Right at that moment, the profound energy in Ji-Yu's hand suddenly gathered together in a frenzy. The giant beast patted his chest as if on this piece of land. He looked at Ji-Yu in front of him and suddenly ran out to face Ji-Yu in front of him. He swung his fist. He raised his hand, and a loud bang was heard. All the dark force flew out at this moment. Ding! The host used wind-ripping blade. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. The wind-rending blade arrived in front of the giant beast. Originally, it was a world of ice and snow. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew and arrived in front of the giant beast. Large patches of snowflakes fell onto the giant beast's body, causing him to fall to the ground. Countless amounts of ice profound energy slowly flew towards Ji-Yu at this moment. Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot. He raised his hand and suddenly, he swung his fist again. Another loud bang was heard. The giant beast was directly sent flying backward. He slid on the ground and Ji-Yu swung his fist heavily. The power of the Kuan Peng flew out at this moment and directly arrived in front of the giant beast. The Kuan Peng did not pass through Ji-Yu's body but through his. A trace of white appeared in the giant beast's eyes. The giant beast stared blankly with its mouth wide open and fell down. With a loud bang, he fell to the ground. Ji-Yu's Kuan Peng directly absorbed it. He disappeared on the spot and flew forward. He raised his hand and at this moment, heavy dark force pressed down. He shrunk the giant beast in front of him. At this moment, a strong mental strength poured into the giant beast and the threads of dark force tied it up. He pulled it up. At this moment, the giant beast in front of him stood up slowly. The giant beast had already become a puppet in Ji-Yu's hands. He carried the warhound's greatsword and walked forward, arriving in front of the evolving temple. In the end, Ji-Yu decided not to disturb those who were sleeping underground. He walked into the temple with the soul rope. "Kid, be careful." The Ice Queen's words directly affected Ji-Yu's body. His gaze locked onto the stone statue in front of him. With a loud boom, the statue exploded. The Ice Queen's figure appeared in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu shrugged. He said to the person in front of him, "You go." The remnant soul looked at Ji-Yu in disdain. She directly walked in front of that person. Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot. There was no need to interfere in a battle between women. Moreover, this woman was fighting with her own soul. At this moment, the two figures were fighting each other. With a loud rumble, Ji-Yu disappeared. Shortly after, the Queen of Ice and Frost fused with the two remnant souls. She stood up and fused with the two remnant souls in an instant. A loud rumbling sound was heard. At this moment, the rest of the people ran forward and jumped up. Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot. He raised his hand. At this moment, an aura shield appeared on his body. He disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, Ji-Yu took out a treasure weapon. An aura shield covered his body. A loud bang sounded. At this moment, the two goddesses started fighting. However, the main character was stronger. When he saw the Queen of Ice, The person attached to the stone statue tried to escape frantically. She wanted to escape from the Ice Queen. Although she was only a remnant soul, she longed for freedom. True freedom. As a soul with thoughts, she wanted to leave. Ji-yu said calmly, "You want to leave? That wouldn't do." Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the warhound's great sword appeared. He heavily slashed at the other party. Then, he appeared on the spot. He said calmly, "Is it that hard to let me go?" Ji-yu shook his head. "Cute queen, either you die now or she dies." After saying this, the Ice Queen looked at Ji-yu with resentment. It was as if she was a demon in the human world. The Ice Queen's soul disappeared on the spot and avoided Ji-yu. She sensed Ji-yu's profound realm strength and didn't want to be entangled with him. However, as Ji-yu slammed his hands on the ground. At this moment, several ice walls surrounded the Ice Queen's divided soul. The soul knew that Ji-yu didn't want to let her live. She resentfully turned around. Spiritual power was released. At this moment, it gathered. A loud rumbling sound was heard. Chapter 660. A powerful spiritual power spread out. In the Ice Queen's heart, a trace of vigilance appeared. She raised her head with a frown. "Not good, Ji-yu wants to self-destruct." After shouting this, he disappeared on the spot and appeared in front of Ji-yu in the blink of an eye. Ji-yu looked in front of the Ice Queen. When the Ice Queen released her spiritual power to suppress the divided soul revealed a smile and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Damn, I was tricked by her." The Ice Queen angrily shook the giant thing in front of her. Ji-yu took in a cold breath. "All right, don't be angry. Let's see what we should do next." The cold Ice Queen felt like a little girl for the first time. Ji-yu closed her eyes and released her powerful spiritual power, but she couldn't sense the existence of the divided soul. The Ice Queen had a time limit every time she came out. In the blink of an eye, she returned to Ji-yu's soul rope. Ji-yu disappeared in the blink of an eye. When she appeared in the next moment, she was already 100 miles away. When she left the extreme north, Ji-yu appeared in the sacred rich profound sect. Countless disciples were holding weapons, waiting at the bottom of the mountain. After all, the sect master's profound strength had been crippled. For the entire sacred rich profound sect, this was a great shame. Their eyes were locked onto Ji-yu. Only he knows about this matter. As long as we kill him, no one will know about this. It was unknown who shouted first, but the rest of the people charged in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu raised the warhound's great sword in her hand and swung it down. In an instant, there was a flash of light in the sky. Ding! The host has used Fierce Wind Blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Amidst the gale, there were countless heavy blades that directly cut wounds on everyone. Ji-yu instantly disappeared from where he was. By the time he arrived at the edge of the crowd, there was already a group of people lying in a pool of blood. He sneered and disappeared from where he stood. Now that he had learned that the Union of 10,000 Immortals was paying attention to the divided soul, Ji-yu absolutely could not let the divided soul of the Queen of Ice and Frost be taken away. Thinking of this, he instantly disappeared. His target was the Jincheng sect. The sect leader of the Jincheng sect had died, and the elders had lost their Shen Qi one after another. Now, the sect was facing the problem of life and death. It was unknown where a second-rate sect had come from, but they had led countless people to stand outside the Jincheng sect's mountain gate. Fortunately, the array formation protecting the mountain gate was still in place. However, the disciples who had gone out to purchase items were all captured by them. Although the disciples within the array formation were anxious, there was nothing they could do. Their eyes were locked on the disciples of the Jincheng sect. The leader was a middle-aged man with disheveled hair. "I am Daoist Feng Ji-yu. Today, I heard that the Gold City sent out a problem. I am willing to lead the mysterious Wind sect to take over the Gold City sect so that your holy light can continue to shine on this land." Nonsense. It was unknown who took the lead to walk out and spat in his direction. However, when the saliva landed outside the array formation, It only made a ding sound and was blocked. He did not care and only laughed out loud. So what if you guys are hiding inside? If you have the ability, release the array formation. Your female disciples will also become the Tao companions of our mysterious wind sect's male disciples. After saying this, the remaining disciples of the mysterious Gate of Wind all burst out laughing. An inner sect disciple gritted his teeth. Now, in the entire sect, he was the only one who was above the 4th level of the Spirit Profound Realm. He took a step forward and covered his body with his profound chi aura. Let go of my junior brother. 4th level of the Spirit Profound Realm? Little rookie. Daoist Feng Jiyu glanced at him with disdain and waved his hand. The person beside him took a step forward and a long braid appeared in his hand in an instant. Pa. A huge rock instantly shattered. He lightly said, "Brat, don't be arrogant. Go for him." After shouting these words, the people around him all flew forward. The treasure weapons in their hands were all drawn out and directly landed on the head of the other party. That person saw that the situation was not good and immediately dodged to the side. When the long sword fell, he waved the whip in his hand to receive it. At this moment, the whip suddenly struck the long sword. With a pa sound, the long sword actually shattered. He looked at his shattered long sword in horror. This was a 5th grade artifact, and it was passed down from generation to generation. How was this possible? The Golden City sect disciples beside him were even more anxious as they shouted, "Senior brother, are you okay? Senior brother, be careful." Daoist Feng Gu's disciple grinned and suddenly kicked him. Seeing that he fell to the ground, 4 or 5 artifacts were immediately placed on his throat. Daoist Feng Jiyu said with great elegance, "I'll give you guys 1 minute to remove the array. Otherwise, I'll kill him." When they heard this sentence, everyone lowered their heads. The elders of the Golden City sect walked out with their crutches. He sighed and did not know what to say. He just closed his eyes and took out a token. He sighed and said, "My Golden City sect can't have no one. Open it." After saying this, he walked toward the cliff of reflection in despair. Everyone immediately laughed out loud. At this moment, a young voice sounded. "Get out of the way. Who is it? How dare you?" They all turned their heads and saw Jiyu leading the horse and slowly walking toward them. He said faintly, "Get lost. Brat, you're courting death." One of them cursed loudly. With a long sword in his hand, he directly charged in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu did not dodge. She just bent her body and instantly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, she took out the giant sword of the war hounds and directly slashed at the 2 people. The 2 disciples were at least at the 4th level of the Spirit Profound Realm and above, but they were killed by Jiyu in 1 strike. They were shocked. This brat doesn't have any profound chi fluctuations. How can he be so powerful? Jiyu's strength was not limited to this. It was time for the giant beast that he used to refine the puppet to see the light. He waved his hand and a giant beast suddenly appeared on the ground. It slapped its chest. He let out a furious roar. Roar. Chapter 661. The giant beast looked at the people in front of it. When Jiyu was forging it, she did not seal its intelligence. Under the influence of Jiyu's intelligence, the giant beast actually had a certain level of intelligence. This was an extremely rare existence among the puppets. "Mph, it's just a broken puppet." A cold look appeared in his eyes. His figure flashed and disappeared from his original spot. After a while, when he reappeared, he was holding 2 huge axes. He directly chopped down in the direction of Jiyu. When the giant beast saw its master being chopped down, how could it still sit down? It only let out a roar, patted its chest, and turned around. It directly waved its hand and grabbed the axes in front of it. It roared and came over. It directly swung its hand and threw the axes out. The axes arrived in front of the 2 people. They raised their hands and blocked the axes. However, a trace of fear appeared in the hearts of the cultivators of Daoist Feng Jiyu. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu disappeared from her original spot and stood on the giant beast's shoulder. "Kill those who block the way. After receiving Ji-yu's order, the giant beast controlled its body and stepped forward step by step. As it roared, it uprooted all the surrounding trees. It directly waved the trees, sending the surrounding disciples of the mysterious sect of wind flying. Unknowingly, Ji-yu had already arrived in front of the great protective mountain array. Ji-yu said indifferently, "You're so useless. Come back here." After hearing this, the disciple of the Jincheng sect beside him suddenly stood up. The sect leader of the mysterious sect of wind was instantly furious. When had he ever endured such bullying? He walked in front of Ji-yu, pointed at Ji-yu's nose and shouted loudly, "Brat, you're simply going too far." After shouting this sentence, he instantly disappeared from his original spot. The formation slowly descended at this moment. The eyes of the people of the Jincheng sect suddenly lit up. They looked at each other and saw Ji-yu take a step forward. In the blink of an eye, a white light lit up around them. Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. At this moment, Daoist Feng Ji-yu stepped forward and said faintly, "Brat, you actually dare to provoke our Feng Ji-yu lineage? Go. I want him dead." When all the disciples heard this, they immediately surrounded Ji-yu. When Ji-yu saw this scene, she turned around. It seemed that she had no choice but to kill today. Under Ji-yu's command, the people around her took a step forward and rushed towards the giant beast. In an instant, countless beams of mystic light collided with the giant beast. The giant beast was just a puppet and did not feel anything. It grabbed the other people one by one and exerted force in its hand, causing them to spit out blood. Everyone fell into a pool of blood. Ji-yu said faintly, "Capture the leader first." After shouting this sentence, the giant beast took 2 steps forward and directly lifted one of them up with one hand. It then heavily threw one of them to the ground, followed by a punch. Everyone spat out a mouthful of blood. Daoist Feng Ji-yu was simply about to explode. In his hands, a hurricane was produced. In an instant, the hurricane arrived in front of Ji-yu. Ji-yu raised her hand and waved her sword again. Ding, the host used wind blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. At this moment, the 2 forces of wind collided together. In the fierce wind, countless scorching blades directly slashed on his body, causing blood to drip. Daoist Ji-yu Feng had never expected that his move would be so easily countered by someone else. His blood continued to flow like a fountain. This was simply an inconceivable thing. He had never experienced such a thing. He suddenly opened his eyes and disappeared in an instant. In an instant, he pulled out the magical weapon in his hand and swung it down heavily, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. All the surrounding people were all sent flying. They all landed on the ground. Ji-yu raised his hand and disappeared from where he was. In the next moment, he swung out his bejeweled weapon and chopped down on his opponent's head. All he could smell was the scent of fresh blood falling down. Daoist Feng Ji-yu never expected that today, he would be beheaded by a boy who was not even 18 years old. However, all of this had nothing to do with him. He fell to the ground in an instant. This was the second time that Ji-yu saved their lives. Countless hearts of joy burst out in an instant. Countless disciples of the Jincheng sect surrounded Ji-yu and kept chanting, "Forever, Xianfeng will always be here." When these words were shouted, Ji-yu became the official leader of the Jincheng sect. Their eyes were fixed on Ji-yu. Ji-yu said lightly, "Okay." That night, bonfires spread throughout the Jincheng sect. Ji-yu stood on the immortal wind platform and said lightly, "From today onwards, this place will be renamed the Evolving Temple." All the disciples of the Jincheng sect looked at each other. However, the Jincheng sect had been passed down for hundreds of years. They should be satisfied now. Ji-yu's strength alone could destroy the sect. How could they continue to be in a deadlock? They all knelt down and were willing to submit. Ji-yu brought the dean of the academy in from Tianjing City. After he walked in, his eyes were fixed on Ji-yu. He said lightly, "You did well." The split soul ran away. "The goddess is anxious." After hearing Ji-yu's words, he looked up and suddenly became anxious. "You mean the goddess is still alive in this world?" After hearing Ji-yu's words, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. Ji-yu smiled. At the same time, She waved her hands. In an instant, an illusory figure appeared. The current Queen of Ice and Frost was no longer pretending to be a man like Ji. Her beautiful figure was exceptionally eye-catching in this temple. However, the goddess's figure only flashed by. The old man was overjoyed. He knelt on the ground and said, "Greetings to the goddess, great elder." He knew in his heart that Ji had now become the great elder of the evolving temple. Only the great elder could have the rope of spirit. Chapter 662. Ji asked him to stretch out his hand. "Elder Changsha, I'm here to see how your injury is." Changsha chuckled, "Little friend, you don't know. This old man was injured by a hidden weapon in the past. I'm afraid that there's no medicine now." When Ji said that he wanted to see if there was any possibility of recovery, the old man only smiled slightly. He really didn't dare to believe that he could still be so powerful. He raised his hand and saw that the surrounding profound energy was slowly closing in on Ji. Along with the support of his spiritual power, it directly entered the old man's body. Now, in the battle 100 years ago, because Elder Changsha had just awakened, his strength was not strong. In addition, Sheng Xian sect had gathered many sects from the union of 10,000 immortals, so it was normal for him to be defeated. Ji followed his meridians and gradually radiated out. Under the support of Ji's spiritual power, those meridians slowly gathered together, and there seemed to be faint signs of recovery. Ji heavily slapped his back, and at this time, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes widened, and he sat cross-legged on the ground. Seeing that the Xian energy in his body was gradually forming, but now he wanted to let Elder Changsha solidify his Xian energy. He also wanted to help him reconstruct his Dantian, so he needed a strong Dantian as his new Dantian. Ji had already prepared for this. He waved his hand, and in an instant, a corpse appeared. After seeing the corpse, Ji directly stretched out his hand and inserted it into the corpse. He suddenly reached out and immediately pulled the Dantian out from the corpse. Originally, Ji wanted to use Daoist Ji Feng as a puppet, but now his Dantian could be used first. He waved his hand heavily, and the Dantian was inserted into Elder Changsha's body. Elder Feldstone suddenly opened his eyes wide. He felt a burst of refreshment in his heart. This was simply too delightful. His strength was constantly breaking through. In the blink of an eye, Ji waved her hands and channeled a burst of profound energy into him. Elder Feldstone's new Dantian had fused well with his body, and very soon, it formed a new strength. He let out a long breath. "This is simply too inconceivable. I never thought that there would be a possibility of rebirth after the Dantian was destroyed." Ji smiled faintly. "In this world, nothing is impossible." Yes. He laughed out loud. He never thought that Ji would be able to reshape the situation with just a light touch. Ji said faintly, "From today onwards, we welcome Elder Longsha's return." After hearing Ji's words, Longstone sighed. "It's a pity that my good brothers are still sleeping underground." Ji said calmly, "There's no other way. They can only continue to sleep to see the return of the Queen of Frost." "Haha, that's right. From today onwards, this is the new ice shrine. However, these disciples are truly too weak." Ji shook her head and took a step forward. Closing her eyes, she seemed to hear a voice calling out to her. In the blink of an eye, rows of ancient books appeared in front of her. Elder Longsha touched those books lovingly. With these books, there was no need to worry about not being strong. The Queen of Frost kept urging Ji to find the divided soul, but Ji was not in a hurry. He just wanted all the disciples to walk into the middle of the square. He wanted to personally examine them and see if there were any talents among them. Ji glanced at the disciple at the end of the crowd. "That disciple, you come out." "What? That trash can get the temple master's attention. He's just a trash. Presumably, the temple master wants to expel him." "That's right." Everyone started talking at once. Ji infused her mental strength into his body. Fairy Ruolan had completely settled down in the evolution shrine. Her motto was that since her master was here, she had to be here too. Ji-yu did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she had no choice but to accept him. He said faintly, "All right, my good child, you can stay here." She was overjoyed when she heard this. Ji-yu saw that this child was also an outstanding one. Although his body was still lacking, his eyes were telling Ji-yu that he had the incomparable wisdom to evolve. "Are you willing to be my disciple?" Suddenly, everyone was in an uproar. The young man looked at Ji-yu in shock. He never thought that fate would fall on him. He asked cautiously, "Master?" "Ha ha ha, from today onwards, you'll be called Jiang Qing and you'll be my disciple." "What?" Everyone was indignant. How could this fool become their direct disciple? Ji-yu merely tapped on his body and the meridian that had been hindering his development suddenly broke. The profound energy that had been suppressing him instantly filled his body. Body tempering realm. Defensive profound realm. Spirit profound realm. Finally, it stopped at the 8th level of the spirit profound realm. They never expected that a disciple who was just a piece of trash would be able to unleash his full strength at the 8th level of the spirit profound realm just because of a single meridian. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Ji-yu, saying, "Greetings, Master. This disciple will follow Master for the rest of his life." It was more like a gala, but Ji-yu did not mind at all. He helped him up and said faintly, "As my disciple, you must first be someone who doesn't let yourself down. Then, do as much good as you can." After he finished speaking, he taught him the wind blade of the wind inheritance. It could be said that Jiang Qing's talent was extraordinary. In just 6 hours, he ran over and told Ji-yu that he had already grasped the basics of this profound skill. This made Fairy Ruolan very unhappy. She grabbed Ji-yu's hand and insisted that he teach her a more powerful profound skill. Ji-yu then passed a profound skill book to her. After learning for a few hours, there was still no progress. However, just as Ji-yu was enjoying this beautiful moment, the dragon exterminating gang handed him a few monthly reports. Ji-yu immediately frowned. It seemed that the war in the southern region was not going well. Even with the combined forces of 3 regions, they were still unable to take down the eastern region. Ji-yu's western region had already suffered many casualties. The northern region's main forces had already taken over the western region's forces and were waiting for the final battle. Chapter 663. She turned to the last page of the Jiang Hu monthly report. It was recorded that several major sects in the western region were destroyed by a mysterious woman at the same time. There was even a new gang called the Free Profound Sect. Ji-yu smiled faintly. This girl was clearly telling him that she would definitely go after Ji-yu in the future. Ji-yu didn't care too much and put it down again. At the end of the report, there was only a large figure in it. The Union of 10,000 Immortals was investigating the Golden City sect. It seemed that in the end, their eyes were locked on Ji-yu's evolving temple. They were very curious about what kind of treasure the Ice Queen had left in the evolving temple. If they wanted to take it away, as long as they had the treasure in the evolving temple, then, they would be able to step into a new realm. What a beautiful thought. Ji-yu thought at this moment. Just as she walked out of the door of the main hall, 2 people ran in and knelt on the ground. They cupped their hands and said, "Hall Master, there is an envoy outside the mountain gate." Ji-yu walked out and looked at the people kneeling on the ground. She asked, "You call yourself an envoy? Where are you from?" When they heard Ji-yu's words, they immediately laughed out loud. They raised their heads and said faintly, "I'm Chen Yan, the 7th elder of the Profound Li Profound sect, a secondary sect of the Union of 10,000 Immortals." "That's a pretty long name, but it's pretty much your own name." After hearing this, he clenched his fists. "Boy, you have big guts. I heard that you changed your sect without permission. I think you mainly want to annex it. The Union of 10,000 Immortals doesn't have the habit of annexing other sects. Do you know what kind of crime you have committed?" He said to Ji-yu angrily, "Kneel down obediently and let this old man take back your sect." It seemed that he was extremely confident in his strength. Ji-yu smiled disdainfully. "You have to have that ability first." After seeing Ji-yu's smile, he took a step forward in disdain, as if he saw Jiyu as a scourge. He said indifferently, "Brat, you're just a piece of trash. How dare you block this old man's path? You're courting death." After shouting this, they stepped forward and looked in the direction of Jiyu. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from where he was. The next moment, he suddenly stabbed in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu disappeared in the blink of an eye. By the time it appeared, it was already behind him. He slapped down heavily with his palm. With a loud bang, the palm slapped on the back of the young man. A mouthful of blood spurted out from the young man's mouth. Never had he expected that Jiyu's strength would actually be formidable to such an extent. He suddenly turned around and locked his eyes on Jiyu. 10,000 miles flying insects. He suddenly released his mystical skill. Wherever the insects passed, whether it was flowers or trees, everything disappeared. Jiyu snorted coldly. Ding. The host used Raging Inferno. The reward is 1 times 999 experience points. The Raging Inferno instantly burned the insects. He frowned as he was burned by the insects. He never expected that Jiyu's Raging Inferno would be so strong. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from where he was and pulled out his sword. "This old man underestimated you just now. But you won't be so lucky next time." He snorted coldly as if he wanted to take away Jiyu's life. Jiyu pulled out her precious weapon and clashed heavily with his sword. He did not use any mystical energy. When the two swords clashed, a loud sound was heard. The two giant swords clashed together and made a loud sound. It was as if the two treasures were showing off their grades to each other. He suddenly pulled back his precious weapon and said indifferently, "Go back and tell the Union of 10,000 Immortals that from today onwards, the profound sect of Gold City will become the Shrine of Ice. If they are not satisfied, they can come at any time." His words infuriated him to the point where he couldn't vent his anger. He immediately got up and left. Chen Yan did not have any confidence that he could fight with Jiyu now. Jiyu walked to the field alone. Looking at the poor soil, he suddenly understood that there was one more thing that could determine whether one was good or evil. He walked to the soil and took out countless seeds from his robes. He scattered them on the ground. The seeds that were scattered on the ground instantly sank into the soil. After waiting for a month, everyone would definitely be surprised. As soon as Chen Yan of the Union of 10,000 Immortals returned to his own sect, he started to cry and complain. The Union of 10,000 Immortals flew into a rage. For so many years, no sect dared to go against them. Where did this nameless kid come from? He actually dared to go against them. Perhaps they had not been in the world for so long that their eyes and ears were blocked. They were unwilling in their hearts. However, when they heard that the Wind sect had been completely wiped out, they were unwilling to provoke Jiyu. They could only announce to the public that Jiyu had taken over their sect. It was evil. The dragon-slaying gang in the mortal world had been attacked by countless people. Jiyu smacked the boulder heavily. This bunch of gutless bandits actually had the guts to do such a thing. He directly summoned the 18 golden puppets and attached a trace of his soul to one of the puppets. Instantly, the puppet took on the appearance of Jiyu. Jiyu returned to the cave by himself. He wanted to properly absorb the Shen energy of the 5 great profound sects. He wanted to turn it into his own treasure. His doppelganger, which was the current Jiyu in the mortal world, came to the dragon-slaying gang. When they heard that their gang leader had become the leader of the profound sect of Gold City, they were incomparably excited. A burly man said, "That's great. We can finally vent our anger." However, the puppet said, "I'm just a doppelganger of Master. My strength is not strong. So this time, we have to use our wits." Wits. Everyone's heart thumped. Ever since the Union of 10,000 Immortals listed them as an evil sect, they had become a rat crossing the street. Jiyu's doppelganger was not in a hurry. Didn't they create a saintess a few days ago? They all said that the saintess is a flower of a Shen beast. She's not a good thing. Everyone agreed one after another. Jiyu's doppelganger sneered, "We have the foundation of the people. They don't know that in front of the vast number of people, Shen cultivators are nothing but illusions. Then what should we do?" Ji-Yu's doppelganger moved his storage ring. In an instant, countless bottles of Shen roots appeared. Ji-Yu's doppelganger said faintly, "Go, distribute these to the people. However, we have to collect a certain amount of Shen stones and gold coins." Chapter 664. Everyone thought that these things must be good treasures, but they could also make them a windfall. Thinking of this, they all looked at each other. The next day, on the streets of Tianjing City, Gaombal's father walked out of the mortal gates of various sects with his child crying. He sighed. "You don't have the ability to be accepted by the profound sect, so you can only become a mortal in the future. There's nothing you can do about that, so you should work hard in the future." After saying this, he took a step forward and shook his head, disheartened. At this moment, a guy with a ghost face walked out. He asked wretchedly, "Guest, do you want to become a Shen cultivator?" Who doesn't want to become a Shen cultivator? However, Gaombal's father was a shrewd person. This person looked so ugly and was asking at the end of the street. Could he be a swindler? He raised his head and asked indifferently, "Who are you?" That person said indifferently, "I'm the person who came to give you an opportunity." After hearing this, Gaombal and his father looked at each other. "Don't play with us." Since ancient times, only those who obtained Shen roots had the hope of entering that beautiful world. "We father and son know what our status is, so don't come and harass us." They looked at each other and seemed to agree with this view. That wretched-looking man said, "Do you dare to come with me? After seeing it, you'll understand." They watched him walk away casually. However, becoming a Shen cultivator meant that they could become a legendary immortal. Even the emperor would be moved, let alone them, mere mortals. Thinking of this, the father and son looked at each other. "If you dare to deceive us, father and son, we'll break your legs." After saying this, they coldly snorted and directly stepped into the small room in front of them. They looked at each other and saw that the people here were displaying all kinds of high-level Shen skills. They were flying around, obviously a group of experts. There were also a few youths who came with them. One of the youths couldn't bear this enviable scene and stepped forward. "I wonder if I have the ability to do so." An old man wearing a long robe walked out. He had a benevolent look on his face. "What a good child." After patting the young man's head, the old man took out a ginseng-like thing, and the young man put a large bag of gold coins on top of the basin. Then, he carefully took the spirit root and impatiently ate it. After that, he drank a bottle of holy water. In an instant, his temperament underwent a huge change. He walked in front of a huge rock and slammed his fist down. The huge rock instantly shattered. He looked at his hands in surprise. Go Meatball and his father looked at each other. Could it be that this brat was a Celestial Foundation elite? He was a genius. However, judging from his snot, he didn't look like a smart person. "Now you should believe me, right?" He didn't dare to say anything more. He just obediently took out a big bag from his arms and put it on the basin. He tossed the bag of gold coins in his hand. A smile of joy appeared on their faces. Go Meatball and his father suddenly became a standard Shen cultivator. They were very happy. However, they also saw that there were people who couldn't step into this sect because they didn't have money. That housekeeper only asked them to offer their blood. It turned out that those shitty sects had always monopolized the so-called opportunity. Everyone could become a Shen cultivator. In this world, there was no such thing as insufficient talent. They looked at each other and immediately burst out laughing. Ji-Yu's clone stood on top of a tall building and looked at the scene in front of her. "We only need to wait for a month. Everything in this world will be different. Listen to my orders. Distribute these medicines to the nearby towns." Ji-Yu's clone had miscalculated. Regarding the common people's desire for Shen cultivators, in just half a month, Ji-Yu's clone had sold out all the medicines. It was time for someone to fall into the trap. Right now, no one was interested in entering the ancient profound sect. They were very curious about what had happened. They sent people to find out. It wasn't good if they didn't ask, but when they did, they were shocked. They only saw a few people kneeling on the ground and reporting this news to carefree sect's Li Nyan. Li Nyan was a representative figure in the mortal world. In order to obtain the title of Shen cultivator, he had paid more than anyone else. But now, he was actually told that anyone could become a Shen cultivator. Wasn't this a huge joke? If this news were to spread, all of them Shen cultivators wouldn't be able to show their faces anymore. When he thought of this, an indescribable rage filled his mind. This is simply preposterous. This is utter nonsense. He was incomparably angry. With a slight wave of his hand, countless disciples kneeled on the ground. Ji Yu's clone sensed that someone was coming over. She stood up and said to the people of the dragon-slaying gang, "Bring those corpses up." Man-made Shen roots had a huge flaw. Not only could it allow people to enter the Shen cultivator realm, there were also people who naturally rejected these kinds of Shen roots. However, no one would denounce this matter. Among the tens of millions of people, there were only a little more than 100 dead people. This was already extremely lucky. After Ji Yu's clone finished speaking, those puppet masters controlled the corpses to stand in place. The black-clothed people descended one after another. They represented the disciples of the carefree sect. They were here to represent justice and completely annihilate this sect. Today, unexpectedly, it was faster than expected. More than 100 devil sect disciples couldn't even withstand a single blow. They were defeated at the first touch. They raised their swords and chopped down on the crowd. Looking at the ground full of corpses, they left complacently. However, they would never have thought that a single piece of profound stone would record everything they had done. Ji Yu's clone discovered that the profound stone only needed to be slightly modified to record everything in the surroundings. It could show the original scene and could also be wirelessly replicated. After the people from the Free Profound sect left, they threw the stones with the portraits into the houses of every family. Now, Ji Yu's clone's man-made Shen roots were in short supply. Everyone was waiting for the Shen roots to be distributed. But now, the people who distributed the Shen roots were all dead. Chapter 665. All the mortals, as well as the Shen cultivators who wanted to upgrade their spirit roots, received this news. They held their precious weapons in their hands and glared at those so-called Shen cultivators. They ran to the front of those people's houses in an aggressive manner and shouted loudly, "Get the hell out here. What right do you have to kill people? That's right. You've gone too far. Hand over the murderers. Hand over the murderers." Every one of them shouted aggressively. Their eyes were filled with ferocity, as if they wanted to devour the people in front of them. The soldiers standing on the city walls looked down one after another. Their hearts trembled slightly. They looked at each other. One of them stepped forward and said indifferently, "Who's so bold to be so disrespectful?" He shouted indifferently, "Kill." The surrounding people took a step forward and ran out of the mansion. Every one of them had an ominous glint in their eyes. They were like bloodthirsty beasts, directly pouncing in the direction of the commoners. For a moment, screams sounded incessantly. After hearing these screams, Ji Yu didn't make a move. The Shen cultivators who were watching also didn't make a move. However, those who obtained man-made Shen roots couldn't sit still. They wanted to seek justice for those who died. None of them knew how to use Shen skills because they were extremely powerful. After seeing Ji Yu's clone, they couldn't help but stand behind Ji Yu, as if they were looking at dead people. They looked at the crowd in front of them and raised their hands. As their hands heavily swung down, countless bows and arrows flew in an instant. These bows and arrows were all imbued with Shen Qi. Although they didn't have Shen Qi, these Shen cultivators of the mortal world weren't very strong. Under these bows and arrows imbued with Shen Qi, it was already considered good to be able to block a few arrows. After these long swords pierced through their chests, they fell into a pool of blood. They fell into a pool of blood one after another. Another group of people walked out and cried out the names of the dead. Then, they said, "We were sent by the Saintess to teach the world the way to eternal life. We will never die. Even if one of us dies, there will be thousands of us. Do you agree?" After hearing his words, Everyone looked at each other and agreed with him too much. After saying this, the man took out the holy water. Holy water is here. Everyone is in awe. Everyone knelt down on the ground in an instant. After knowing that it was the saintess who did such a benevolent thing, everyone spurned those who had slandered the saintess. Apart from the representatives of the major profound sects in the mortal world, they all killed themselves. One after another, they pulled out their knives and committed suicide out of shame. They had no choice but to commit suicide. Just the spittle alone could completely swallow them up. After feeling this point, Lin Fan was stunned. They all retreated. They all knelt in the pool of blood. Ji Yu's clone said faintly, "From today onwards, the Ice Frost sect will spread in the Heavenly Realm City." The truth was just as Ji Yu's clone had predicted. Now, if anyone dared to say anything bad about the saintess, there would be people who wanted to kill them. Not to mention slandering the holy sect, they would be beaten up by everyone. Seeing that her task was completed, Ji Yu's clone got up and returned to the former Jincheng sect, which was now the Ice Sealing Shrine. Ji Yu, who was in the cave, had also completely digested all the Xian Qi absorbed from the Jincheng sect's leader. Now, the 5 great powers of inheritance had all been upgraded to the 3rd layer of the human profound realm. When she opened the stone door, she saw her clone standing outside. Ji Yu just patted his forehead, and that trace of spiritual power suddenly returned to her body. He just moved his mind, and everything entered Ji Yu's mind. Ji Yu laughed happily like a child. She didn't expect that her clone would use such a method to solve the problem. She was very smart. At this moment, news came from the dragon-slaying gang. The ancient profound sects that had been wiped out by Ji Yu's clone all refused to accept it. When Chen Yan returned to the sect, the first thing he did was to inform the Carefree sect about this matter. They didn't know that Ji Yu was the real master of the dragon-slaying gang, so they aggressively led people down the mountain gate and wiped out the 2 strongholds of the dragon-slaying gang. It was said that in the strongholds, no matter whether they were male or female, old or young, and even a rat, they were all killed by them. This was not killing rats, but slapping the face of the dragon-slaying gang. However, after a fierce battle, they were no match for the dragon-slaying gang, so Tang Mingyuan brought people to the Gold City sect to ask for Ji Yu's help. Ji Yu nodded and stood up. She had completely handed over the dragon-slaying gang to her brother. Her brother's matter was her own matter. She pulled Tang Mingyuan and flew in the direction of the dragon-slaying gang. By the time she arrived, the dragon-slaying gang was already heavily surrounded. A burly man stood in front of the gate. However, he knew that he was no match for these ancient profound sects, so he held a small magical weapon. He shouted loudly, "Brothers, the gang leader has already gone to find the old gang leader. We have to defend this place and our dragon-slaying gang. If we have to die, let us die first. Live and die together, live and die together." Everyone waved the magical weapons in their hands and shouted continuously. Chen Yan of the Free Profound sect looked at the people in front of him with disdain. He felt that these people were here to die. However, if others wanted to die, why should he stop them? Thinking of this, he smiled happily. He waved his hand and said, "Brothers, these people don't want to live anymore. We don't need to leave them alive. Kill them. After we kill them, I will be responsible for all the consequences." After shouting these words, the people behind him ran out one after another. Under their bodies, they took out long Xian arrows. After shouting loudly, countless Xian arrows flew out. The burly man couldn't hold it in anymore. What would he think when he saw his brothers die by his side? He took out his magical weapon and shouted, "F***CK your grandmother." After shouting these words, he wielded his precious weapon and directly charged forward. The person opposite him coldly snorted, as if he was looking at a group of ants recklessly attacking him. He smiled faintly, as if he could crush these ignorant ants to death in an instant. Chapter 666. He took a step forward. With a heavy wave of his artifact, 2 of the free and unfettered sect's disciples pulled out their artifacts. The 3 life treasures collided with each other. The life treasures in the hands of the two carefree disciples broke apart at this moment. They were blown away and raised their heads to look at the scene in front of them. He said indifferently, "If you want my brother's life, then come at me." The disciples of the dragon-slaying gang behind him were not willing to be outdone. They also took out Xianqi crossbows from their arms and shot out Xianqi arrows one after another. Bang, bang, bang. 3 loud sounds rang out. Bang. The arrows collided with their artifacts. Although their prized artifacts were fine, small white dots had appeared one after another. When they saw these white dots, they were instantly enraged. These people were just insignificant, profound practitioners. What right did they have to go against the high and mighty ancient profound practitioners? When they thought of this, their killing intent grew stronger and stronger. They waved their hands and suddenly, countless arrows flew out. They also began to riot at the same time. They charged towards the dragon-slaying sect's disciples. When they saw that blood was about to flow like a river, a shout suddenly came from behind. "You dare to move?" It was Jiyu's voice. Jiyu appeared in front of everyone from behind. His eyes were fierce, as if he would kill everyone if anything went wrong. When they saw Jiyu's terrifying eyes, they all retreated. As an outer sect elder of the free and unfettered sect, how could Chen Yan allow others to act like a tyrant? In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from where he stood. Go to hell. His precious weapon was like a thunderclap. The power of thunder and lightning filled the tiny, grade 6 precious weapon as a loud rumbling sound echoed out. Jiyu only turned around. After entering the 3rd level of the mortal profound realm, he no longer needed to use the Warhound's greatsword to use the profound skill in his hand. The artifact in his hand was filled with the power of lightning. Profound skill, thunderous iron fist. This was the profound skill of the Gold City sect. Jiyu learned it after a glance. Of course, this was all thanks to the system. Ding. Host used Thunder Iron Fist. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. The power of thunder and lightning suddenly erupted at this moment. With a boom, his iron fist collided heavily with Chen Yan's fist. With a loud rumble, Jiyu disappeared on the spot. He said indifferently, "Kill." After shouting "kill," the surrounding crowd rushed in and surrounded Jiyu. Jiyu instantly disappeared from his spot. Holding his sword, he watched as Chen Yan stood in the middle of the crowd. He was probably trying to use others to protect himself. The corners of Jiyu's mouth curled into a smile. He landed on the ground and raised his hand. The moment he turned around, he instantly chopped off the heads of several people in front of him. Chen Yan looked at Jiyu with a twisted expression. What kind of monster was this? He suddenly thought of something and disappeared from his spot. He wanted to retaliate, but he did not expect that Jiyu had already disappeared in front of him. Jiyu's iron fist descended, carrying with it a strong surge of profound energy. The sound of thunder almost breaking rang out beside his ear. With a loud bang, he disappeared from his spot. Chen Yan scoffed, "You're underestimating me. I'm also a profound practitioner who can control the power of thunder and lightning." At this moment, he suddenly swung his fist. Accompanied by the sound of thunder, the 2 bolts of lightning collided. Chen Yan's hand burned in an instant. He took a step back, and his arm disappeared without a trace in an instant. Jiyu instantly disappeared from his spot. Chen Yan could only let out a scream. He never expected that he, a dignified expert at the spirit profound realm, would have his arm chopped off and could only stay on the spot. His gaze was deep as he looked at Jiyu. He gritted his teeth. He looked in Jiyu's direction and said, "You're very strong. But you shouldn't have gone against us." After saying this, they held onto their weapons and ran towards Jiyu. Their gazes were fixed on Jiyu. Jiyu's figure instantly disappeared from his spot. Countless bolts of lightning struck the ground at this moment. Boom, boom, boom. The power of thunder and lightning exploded on the ground at this moment, and a wave of scorched black soil could be seen on the ground. Jiyu smiled faintly. He raised his head and looked in front of him. He furrowed his brows and looked in front of him. The Free Profound sect had never expected that their first elder of the outer sect would be struck down by the power of thunder and lightning summoned by Jiyu's mystical skill. A charred smell slowly wafted out at this moment. Jiyu asked indifferently, "Do you still want to come up?" After hearing Jiyu's words, the two of them looked at each other. They raised their hands and pointed in Jiyu's direction. "All right, kid, you wait for me obediently." He turned his head and took 2 steps back. But at this moment, he landed on the ground and raised his hand. Jiyu said indifferently, "Your trash sect better send some experts. Otherwise, it won't be enough for me to kill." Seeing Jiyu's arrogance, they looked at each other. Jiyu was too much. She actually dared to look down on them. But now, they couldn't do anything to Jiyu. They could only support each other and walk out. Jiyu sneered. For the Free Profound sect, she must kill 100. Everyone walked towards Jiyu's direction. Their eyes were as if they were looking at a god. Jiyu said indifferently, "Brothers, take your weapons. Let's go and get it back." They shouted excitedly, "Spit out what you owe me. Return what you ate from me." After Jiyu finished speaking, he led the dragon-slaying gang in the direction of the Free Unfettered Profound sect. The Free Unfettered Profound sect watched as the 2 useless disciples returned. The sect leader of the Profound sect, Chen Yan, looked at the 2 and asked, "How high is that kid's Xian Qi?" "We don't know. But Elder Chen Yan died under the protection of so many people. Do they know what kind of profound sect we are?" "He knows, but he doesn't fear us at all. He even killed our people." After hearing this, they clenched their fists. He said indifferently, "You trash." Chapter 667. Chen Yan was instantly enraged. He stood up, and the dark force in his hand suddenly exploded. He grabbed the people in front of him and lifted them up high. He exerted a little force in his hand and lifted the 2 useless disciples up. He exerted a little more force in his hand. That person screamed in agony. At this moment, blood slowly flowed down. Chen Yan did not feel much when he saw the blood all over the ground. His body trembled slightly and he disappeared from where he was. He stood in front of the profound door. He sensed that something was not right in front of him. However, he could not pinpoint what was wrong. He only saw a few cultivators standing in front of the mountain gate. He saw them raise their hands and point their swords in Jiyu's direction. He said calmly, "Kill them." Countless disciples behind him flew out and charged towards Jiyu. They raised their hands and charged towards Jiyu in an instant. They leaped up and slashed their swords heavily towards Jiyu's direction. The people around them drew their treasured weapons. A loud rumbling sound was heard as they raised their hands. Immediately after, the brothers of the dragon-slaying gang sneered. Although their Xian strength wasn't strong, they were definitely loyal people. They drew their treasured weapons and charged towards that group of people. A battle broke out in an instant. They came directly in front of Jiyu and locked their gazes in front of Jiyu. He disappeared from where he was in the blink of an eye. He charged towards Jiyu. At this moment, the 2 of them widened their eyes. Those people stood up and looked at each other. There were 2 loud rumbles. The dragon-slaying gang brothers successfully killed one of them and came forward. They landed on the ground and instantly widened their eyes. It was a chaotic battle. It could only be described as a chaotic battle. Screams of pain could be heard everywhere. Jiyu opened her eyes. Her figure flashed and disappeared from where she was. Ding! The host used the wind blade. Experience points gained, 1 by 999. Countless gusts of wind were crashing against the grand protective array. He laughed out loud and shouted unscrupulously, "You are too ignorant. Do you think you can destroy my defensive formation with your strength?" Chen Yan had originally thought that Jiyu was an expert. He had not expected that Jiyu would be so stupid. He thought to himself as he disappeared from where he stood in the blink of an eye. Jiyu didn't want to use such a light attack to destroy his protective aura. This was just a small trick. His spiritual power accompanied the wind and entered the array formation. At this moment, the wind was blowing violently. His spiritual power merged with the chi aura. It quickly destroyed the formation core of the formation. The array core was originally created by a powerful person. Originally, even with Jiyu's strength, it would not be easy to destroy it. Unfortunately, Jiyu was also an array master and was very clear about the weaknesses of the array. There was a loud rumbling sound. All of a sudden, the Qi gang collapsed one after another. He disappeared from where he stood, raised his hand, and swung it heavily. At this moment, the powerful Shen energy flew out slowly and hit the strong earth wall in front of him. After being hit, the array core turned into a cloud of dust and disappeared from where it was. Everyone was stunned on the spot. Too strong. This strength was really too strong. In just a short period of time, he was able to break the protective formation of an ancient profound sect. This was simply inconceivable. They looked at each other. Speechless expressions appeared on their faces. Chen Yan's heart skipped a beat. He leaped to his feet and ran away. When he was halfway there, he suddenly turned his head around. Then, he took out countless treasures from his bosom. These treasured weapons were mainly hidden weapons. One by one, the round marks appeared in front of Jiyu. After the Shen energy in his hand flew out in an instant, there was a loud rumbling sound. The round marks exploded and the surrounding Shen energy fell. A white fog blocked in front of Jiyu. Jiyu waved his hand. Only then did he disperse the thick fog in front of him. He frowned. He did not expect that Chen Yan's Shen energy was not strong, but he had many thoughts. After sensing that Jiyu was coming, they disappeared in front of Jiyu. He ran madly to the front of the carefree immortal cave. Following a loud bang, a figure flew down. After activating the coiling rock dragon claw in front of him, a door gradually rose up. When Jiyu arrived at the entrance of the cave, Jiyu was stunned. The large door descended and landed on the ground with a loud rumbling sound. Jiyu stood outside the cave door. He took out 18 puppets from his storage ring. Ding. Host used 18 puppets. Obtained experience points, 1 by 999. At this moment, they took a step forward. At this moment, a figure flashed and appeared in front of Jiyu. He ran directly in front of Jiyu. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu disappeared from the spot. He turned around and looked at the crowd behind him. He saw blood flowing to the ground. He said indifferently, "There are actually so many Shen cultivators." The few Shen cultivators beside him followed him. They looked at each other. They never expected that the sect master of the Shen sect would actually escape into the cave while the other party was attacking. This was a great humiliation. However, this was not important now. Jiyu stood in front of the cave door. He reached out and placed his hand on the stone wall. A few people from the dragon-slaying gang retreated. "Sect Master, save us." Jiyu ordered the 18 golden puppets to stay here. He walked in front of the dragon-slaying gang. It turned out that the profound carefree sect's reinforcements had arrived. "Little guy, we old men are still here. The carefree sect must not be destroyed." Jiyu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. He said indifferently, "With just you guys." After hearing this sentence, they clenched their fists. Wasn't this brat a little too arrogant? A few people from the dragon-slaying gang said indifferently, "Old men, haven't you noticed that something is wrong?" The ancestors of the profound carefree sect looked around and instantly understood. Jiyu in front of them, a small person, actually had such terrifying strength. He actually broke the protective formation of the sect. Is this world crazy? They did not dare to believe it. Chapter 668. When Jiyu chased after Chen Yan, the leader of the carefree sect, to the entrance of the cave, as a sect with a long history, there must be some old fellows who did not want to come out. They had lived for an unknown amount of time. But in the end, they were unable to break through beyond the human profound realm, and their lives had come to an end. If there were no accidents, before the opportunity came, they would spend the rest of their lives in a deep sleep. But they did not expect that when they woke up today, the disciples of the carefree sect would be defeated. They were the weakest disciples of their own sects. They were kneeling on the ground. After hearing the news, they were furious. It was because of Gu that they had no choice but to wake up. After waking up, it would be difficult for them to go back to sleep. So all the anger in their hearts was directed at Gu. It was all because of this kid that they came back to this world. The most important thing was that they could not break through to a higher realm. However, what made them even more curious was that Gu was actually able to break through their protective formation. Furthermore, it was as if the formation was just a piece of trash, disappearing without a trace. Thinking of this, their hearts were filled with anger. A person stepped forward. I am the 5th-generation sect leader. Feng Zhihe greets this young master. May I know what my people did to make you want to annihilate us? He was actually able to shatter their protective mountain array. This kid definitely had some ability. As he thought of this, he started to become vigilant. As for how powerful this brat was, he had no idea in his heart. Gu took a step forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Greetings, senior. Your carefree sect killed my people, so you want to annihilate your sect as compensation. So it was like that. The old ancestors breathed a sigh of relief and stepped forward at the same time. They opened their mouths and said, so it was like that. This is just a small problem. How about this? We are willing to compensate with profound stones as compensation. Is the young master satisfied? Their eyes were fixed on Gu. It seemed that as long as Gu refused, they would not hesitate to kill Gu. Gu sensed their fiery gazes and smiled in her heart. This guy's killing intent was too strong. Even before she could say anything, he had already locked onto her. Hee, the lives of our dragon-slaying gang members are far more precious than you can imagine. This sentence was tantamount to destroying the last shred of hope for peace talks. If you don't want to give the Shen sect a way out, then you don't need to leave. How dare you, young master? Brothers, charge. After shouting this sentence, they instantly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in the middle of the square. They opened their eyes, and the long swords in their hands were held in front of them. Brat, since you've made your choice, we can only send you on your way. Feng Zhihe looked at the old man beside him. Shen skill, sword inheritance, heaven-sealing sword. After he shouted, he infused the Shen energy of the 3rd level of the human profound realm into the 7th grade artifact in his hand. He was very confident. He did not know what the old sect leader was afraid of. He was just a young brat. How strong could his Shen energy be? After thinking about this, he swung the sword in his hand down heavily. The artifact emitted a huge light. With a loud bang, a white light came out from the surroundings. A huge circle of light appeared in the air. Countless long swords rained down like heavy rain. Gu frowned. You want to hit me with such a slow speed? Ding, the host used the 3000 cloud movement. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. He instantly disappeared from the spot. However, Gu could not break through the circle of light. She could only retreat first. The 5 swords stabbed into the ground beside Gu, forming a circle. A cold sword light was emitted from the long sword. He said lightly, Haha, little friend, do you think my Shen skill is for trapping people? But you're wrong. My Shen skill is for killing people. Gu only saw the swords around him stabbed into the ground. There seemed to be a trace of lightning surrounding those swords. He snorted coldly. His Shen skill just now was to completely lock Gu to the ground. As he moved, the ring of light burst forth. Like rain, the swords all fell at this moment. A treasure artifact appeared in Gu's hand. He raised his hand and waved it, shattering those swords. This treasure artifact is very beautiful. Senior brother, after I kill this brat, I'll personally bring this treasure artifact to you. The two of them looked at each other and laughed out loud. Gu suddenly raised his head and waved the treasure artifact in his hand. Ding, the host used splitting blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Ding, congratulations to the host for breaking through to minor success in Zephyr Blade. Originally, it was just a gust of wind that carried an invisible blade. However, at this moment, The gust of wind blew in front of the other party, causing him to leap up abruptly. Now, Ji-Yu's gale was in full swing. And with a whistling sound, they realized that this gale was actually able to lift up the ground and blow it in front of the circle of light. With a rumbling sound, it burst out. At this moment, the circle of light cracked open. The strength of the gale was too terrifying. At this moment, the circle of light was blown away, and countless swords were stabbed into the sky. Ji-Yu raised his head and said lightly, "Kill." After shouting this, the free profound sex ancestor who used a sword took a step back. This was an array that he had built with his blood essence. When the array was destroyed, he also suffered a huge backlash. He coughed out a mouthful of blood. "Junior brother, little 7. The people of the Free Profound sect shouted anxiously. "Good job, gang leader. Long live gang leader. Gang leader Wangu Chongqing." The people of the dragon-slaying gang shouted one after another. Ji-Yu raised his head and instantly ran forward. He saw that a few of his brothers in the dragon-slaying gang had lost their arms. He picked up the person in front of him with one hand. He raised the great weapon in his hand and heavily pulled out his sword. The sword pierced through his body and instantly disappeared from the spot. The two treasure artifacts collided in an instant. Chapter 669. The giant Kuan-Peng sword in Ji-Yu's hand seemed to have found the best food. After the two sides collided, it greedily absorbed the power of the opponent's giant sword and gradually transferred it to its own long sword. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Seeing the smile at the corner of Ji-Yu's mouth, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. At this moment, he wanted to escape, but he did not expect that his precious weapon had completely merged with the opponent. The power within the treasure in Ji-Yu's hand was stealthily seeping into his opponent's treasure. He opened his hand and sucked in the long sword. At this moment, he held his own precious weapon and wanted to channel his powerful Shen Qi into it. With this Shen Qi, he would be able to absorb the Shen Qi. He was very confident that he could destroy the precious weapon in Ji-Yu's hand. But it was too late. The giant sword in his hand was frantically absorbing Ji-Yu's giant Kuan-Peng sword, as if it was going to absorb the opponent's dark force. There was a trace of fear in his eyes. This feeling was as if the precious weapon in Ji-Yu's hand could eat the weapon spirit in his precious weapon. And the truth was so coincidental. He had no other choice now. He turned his head and looked helplessly at the people behind him. When they saw this scene, they said at the same time, "Junior brother. Senior brother, save me," he cried out in pain. Feng Zhihe could not bear it any longer. To hell with the rules of the Jianghu. He waved his hand and shouted loudly, "Brothers, let's go." After shouting this sentence, several people beside Feng Zhihe glanced at each other, took out their swords, and ran forward one after another. They raised their long swords and charged directly in the direction of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu snorted coldly. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. He turned around and waved his sword heavily. At this moment, the precious weapons gathered together, and the power of thunder and lightning condensed on Ji-Yu's precious weapon. However, at this moment, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, countless bolts of heavenly lightning struck down at this moment. At this moment, the power of lightning exploded on the ground. The patriarchs were barely able to block the lightning bolts with the artifacts in their hands. Boom, boom, boom. The three bolts of lightning collided with the chi shields around them. The power of thunder and lightning continued to flow in all directions. He snorted coldly and disappeared from the spot. Everyone was running in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu reached out and absorbed the artifact into her hand. He flew out and danced with Ji-Yu. The power of the 4 lightning bolts gathered together at this moment. The lightning bolts solidified one after another like a whip. It struck the profound energy aura shield. A boom rang out as the shield of astral energy that the patriarchs had put together shattered into pieces. They retreated one after another with blood in their mouths. She looked at Ji-Yu with resentment in her eyes. "Kid, don't go too far." After shouting this sentence, Their gazes gathered together at this moment. The patriarchs said calmly, "Sect leader, we're counting on you." They looked at each other. "Go to hell." One of the patriarchs suddenly exerted the profound energy in his body to the maximum and ran toward Gu. Suddenly, the profound energy in his dantian was exerted to the maximum. At this moment, the light also gathered. It was accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. He flew backward in an instant. Gu turned around and said calmly, "I never thought that I would be no match for you." He spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu's lips curled into a smile. He held the artifact in front of him. But he never expected that the profound energy in his dantian would shatter at this moment. Without his dantian, how could he self-destruct? Thinking of this in his heart, the corner of his mouth helplessly smiled bitterly. He closed his eyes. He never thought that after living for such a long time, he would eventually become a useless person. This made him feel worse than killing him. "Senior brothers, I'll take my leave first." After saying this, he picked up the treasure tool on the ground and slit his own neck. At this moment, he fell to the ground. The people around him stepped forward and looked in Gu's direction. The people of the dragon-slaying gang felt as if they had flown into the sky. It was too exciting, too exciting. Their gang leader had actually killed an old freak. He took a deep breath and disappeared on the spot. He picked up the artifact in front of him and looked directly at Gu. "I, Feng Jihe, swear to the heavens that either you or I will die today." After he shouted this, he gathered all the profound energy in his body in the sky. "Kid, my lightning summoning technique is the most powerful thing in this world." After shouting this sentence, countless bolts of lightning instantly struck the treasure weapon. "Want to play with lightning?" At this moment, he suddenly grinned in his heart and the power of lightning gathered on his body. At this moment, the artifact was gathered on the sword. He brandished the precious artifact. It was as if a star had fallen, striking down the entire land. Within the land, there were bursts of charred black. At this moment, they disappeared on the spot. Gu held the huge artifact in her hand and directly charged forward. With a loud boom, the surrounding ground began to explode. Gu stood up. A loud rumbling sound was heard. The surrounding sounds began to explode. He spat out a mouthful of blood. He was such a powerful expert, but the wounds on his body began to turn black. He took 2 steps forward. Now, Feng Jihe was kneeling on the ground. The lightning that Gu summoned was much more powerful than his. This time, it was Gu's power of inheritance that killed him. He knelt on the ground and raised his head with difficulty. He looked in Gu's direction and used all the strength in his body. "Please, can you let him go?" Gu sighed and shook her head. She said indifferently, "I'm sorry, my brother can't die in vain." After saying this, Gu exerted a little force with the artifact in her hand. At this moment, the artifact suddenly pierced through his chest. Chapter 670. When Gu retrieved the artifact, he walked to the entrance of the cave. Under the supervision of the 18 golden puppets, even if there was a secret passage in the cave that could lead to the exit of this small mountain range, he would not be able to escape. In other words, Chen Yan was still in the cave. The corners of Gu's mouth curled into a smile. He stepped on the huge rock, and the Kuan Peng sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He slashed down heavily on the huge rock, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. The huge rock began to shake with a boom. However, as the rock shook, the Kuan Peng sword was unable to leave a single mark on it. This attracted Gu's great interest. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. It was a pity that everyone had forgotten the most important point when they were designing this kind of mechanism. They could only block the impact of the Xian energy from the direction of the huge door. However, they could not block the Xian energy from entering from other places. Gu glanced at his 18 golden puppets. Under Gu's control, the 18 golden puppets all flew up. They floated in the air, quickly rotating their bodies, and arranged themselves. The 18 golden puppets all aimed at the weakest part of the mountain range at the same time. They all crashed into the mountain range at the same time. When the fifth golden puppet landed in the mountain range, a loud rumbling sound was heard, and the ground collapsed at this time. Seeing so much ground collapse, Jiyu's mood immediately improved. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the spot. He ran forward crazily, only to see that the Xian energy was right in front of Jiyu. Jiyu's lips curled into a smile. With a thought, 2 of the 18 golden puppets in the air flew down, one on the left and one on the right, and flew Jiyu into the cave. As soon as Jiyu entered the cave, he saw the limping Chen Yan. He lifted his head and looked in front of him. "Humph, I didn't expect you to be able to chase me all the way here. Not bad." Jiyu smiled faintly. "Here's a gift for you." At this moment, he flung the thing beside him away, and his head rolled to the ground. A total of 10 heads rolled on the ground. At this moment, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. "How is this possible? How could our old ancestor die in your hands?" When he heard this, he took a step back and stepped on a rock. Suddenly, the ground began to collapse. He looked at Jiyu as if he was looking at a fool. "You can go to hell and be ashamed of our ancestors." The collapsing ground quickly reached Jiyu's side. However, the 2 puppets pulled Jiyu up with just a light tug. Then, they looked coldly in Chen Yan's direction. Although this guy didn't have much profound strength, the mechanisms in his hands would surprise you from time to time. Jiyu was a little suspicious of what this guy had built. No matter how she looked at him, he didn't look like a sect master. It would be more appropriate to say that he looked like a mechanic. However, these little mechanisms were useless against Jiyu. When he reached the end of the path, he knew that he couldn't escape anymore. Chen Yan turned his head and burst out laughing. "I didn't expect that I would die here today. But even if I die, this old man will drag you down with me. I'll show you the strength of a treasured weapon master." He slapped his hands on the huge stone statue in front of him. Then, there was a loud rumbling sound. At that moment, the boulder began to shake and shattered its own statue with a single punch. A giant whose entire body was made of black iron appeared in front of Jiyu. This was completely different from the huge stone statue in the trial palace. Jiyu could sense a strong threatening aura from this giant. It was slowly closing in on Jiyu. His brows immediately furrowed. Jiyu said calmly, "I didn't expect that you would have such a treasured weapon." Chen Yan laughed loudly. He looked at Jiyu and asked, "The treasured weapon in your hand doesn't look like something that could be made by an ordinary person. I want to ask, who made this treasured weapon for you?" Jiyu smiled faintly. "I made it myself. I kept injecting my weapon spirit into it to raise its grade." At this moment, the 2 of them were like friends who hadn't seen each other for many years, greeting each other warmly. Jiyu smiled faintly. "You didn't expect this, did you? My treasured weapon was originally only a 5th grade treasured weapon. However, by chance, I killed 3 mystical beasts and it became like this." She didn't expect that this kid's luck would be so powerful. She was really envious. "You should be careful of this treasured weapon of mine." Chen Yan jumped up and sank into the treasured weapon forged from mystical iron. It was as if he could control the giant in his hand. The giant glanced at his arms and legs. He aimed at Jiyu in front of him. "A long time ago, I knew that I wouldn't be able to break through to a more powerful stage. So, to be on the safe side, I purposely created this treasured weapon. There was no other purpose other than to be able to summon it and have it conquer this world for me. What a pity, what a pity." He kept sighing, as if all of this was a very regrettable thing. After sighing twice, he stood up and said calmly, "However, I created this treasured weapon. With this, our carefree sect can be guaranteed to survive for a very long time. I didn't expect that you would kill the old ancestor and half of my disciples. How laughable." He laughed out loud, and the Iron Man suddenly moved. He raised his hands, and 2 streams of flames shot out. The power of the flames was actually on par with Jiyu's raging flames burn the city. Jiyu suddenly raised her hand. Mystical skill, water overflowing the sky. Ding, the host has used water overflowing the sky. You have gained 1 by 999 experience points. The moisture in the air quickly gathered together at this moment. It became a huge water dragon and collided with the Iron Man. The two streams of flames and the water dragon tangled together. The two of them looked at each other and revealed a look of admiration. Chapter 671. However, Ji-yu had more than one type of power of inheritance. He took a step forward. Suddenly, a small circle of light appeared under his feet. Wind dragon, fire dragon, thunder dragon, and earth dragon. The four giant dragons were already flying around Ji-yu, roaring angrily in the air. Through the hollow eyes of the metal man, Chen Yan saw that he actually had 5 types of power of inheritance. He didn't expect that there would be such a genius in this world. It was great to be able to bring such a genius along with him on this journey. Thinking of this, he controlled the metal man on his body, but now his hands were releasing 2 balls of flames. Do you think that my peerless treasure only has this little bit of power? After shouting this sentence, 2 small circles of light appeared behind the metal man. Countless bolts of lightning struck down in an instant, directly forming a small insulating zone, isolating the thunder dragon, the fire dragon, and the others. He saw that the thunder dragon was flying in front of Ji-yu. His gaze was fixed on Ji-yu. He decisively broke the long dragon in front of him, and with a heavy swing of his sword, he collided with the fire dragon and the water dragon. He flew up. Chen Yan looked at the metal man in front of him, and a smile appeared in his heart. At this moment, the giant stood up. He roared, picked up the huge stone sword beside him, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He held the sword and charged in Ji-yu's direction. He suddenly jumped up at this moment. With a loud boom, he slashed in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu raised his hand, and in an instant, dark force gathered in his hand. He disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in the air. Ji-yu waved his hand, and in an instant, 2 streams of dark force spread out rapidly. At this moment, the 2 streams of dark force collided with a loud boom. He flew out and said indifferently, "Kill." Ji-yu said indifferently, "Come." At this moment, a loud rumbling sound rang out as the countless swords collided with each other. Then, they suddenly disappeared from their original positions. Ji-yu's gaze was fixed on the other party. The corners of Chen Yan's mouth curled up into a smile. The metal man shrunk into a ball and began to spin like a wheel. At this moment, it flew rapidly in Ji-yu's direction. It spun directly in front of Ji-yu. Ji-yu raised his hand, and blocked the spinning wheel with one hand. Ji-yu's chi aura was attached to his hand. Surprisingly, he was able to channel that formidable power into his hand. At that moment, he turned around and disappeared from where he was. In the blink of an eye, he was in the air. He waved his hand. In an instant, the metal man was also brought into the air by Ji-yu. He flew in the air. Ji-yu exerted a little force and threw him to the ground. Then, he took 2 steps back and fixed his gaze on the other party. He said indifferently, "You lost." Chen Yan fell to the ground and let out a long breath. He fell to the ground and laughed loudly. He touched the corners of his mouth and suddenly smiled. "I'm satisfied, satisfied. Even if I die today, I'm satisfied." He laughed out loud because he was too strong. However, he was already satisfied that his life treasure was still in this world. "I didn't expect that I would be able to exchange blows with an expert like you before I die." He took out a small metal rod from his pocket and threw it into Ji-yu's hand. "From today onwards, this is yours. Treat it well." Ji-yu went forward to check. It turned out that when he threw him to the ground, his chest was pierced through by a long black metal rod. He didn't lose. He just lost because of luck. Otherwise, the 2 of them would have been able to continue fighting for a while. He sighed and walked in front of his opponent. He pulled him up and threw him into the abyss. Ji-yu didn't take the storage ring in his hand. This was so that the disciples behind him would have something to think about. At this moment, Ji-yu disappeared from the spot. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, he disappeared from his original spot. The members of the dragon-slaying gang came out one after another. When they saw Ji-yu appear, they surrounded Ji-yu. "Gang leader is mighty. Gang leader is mighty. At this time, the two of them were constantly jumping with joy, continuously raising their spears high in the air. Jiyu said indifferently, "Let's go home." The members of the dragon-slaying gang straightened their chests. As for the remaining disciples of the carefree sect, Jiyu didn't ask them to kill them. It was enough for today. However, the carefree sect would soon be swallowed up by the other sects of the Union of 10,000 Immortals. Jiyu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Who would have thought that by doing such a small thing, he would be able to destroy a sect? He disappeared on the spot. At this moment, everyone. After returning to the Gold City sect, Jiyu glanced at the cultivation of all the disciples. Seeing that their cultivation was not bad, he walked out alone. The members of the dragon-slaying gang continued to inquire about the carefree sect. Jiyu wanted to see what this little separated soul was going to do. When he came in front of a small piece of land, he raised his head and waved his hand. A small fishing rod appeared in Jiyu's hand. Jiyu sat on a chair. He gently waved his hand. In an instant, the fishing rod was waved out and the line of the fishing rod fell into the small lake. The fishes were swimming around. Seeing that Jiyu was about to catch a big fish, Jiyu suddenly smelled a fragrance behind him. Without making a sound, he leaped up and landed on a place not far away. He looked out. "Give me your life, dog." Jiyu gently touched the surface of the water and dodged the attack. It kept jumping up and down on the surface of the water. That beautiful figure approached Jiyu and pulled the small spear in front of Jiyu. Jiyu reached out and grabbed the spear. In the blink of an eye, a loud catcher sound was heard from the spear. He pulled the girl into his arms and gave her a heavy slap on the butt. Chapter 672. The girl gasped. "Yes." Jiyu said indifferently, "You didn't beat me enough last time. Now you want to be beaten again?" The girl was the one he met in the forest. Jiyu took a step forward and the two of them looked at each other. The girl said, "Do you remember my name?" Jiyu smiled, "You didn't say it. You just wrote a golden character on my hand. Humph. Take me out to play. I want to see the world." The girl's identity was definitely not simple. The last time they met, this girl's subordinates had almost taken his life. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Okay." After saying this, Jiyu's figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on the road. Jiyu took the girl to the street. She took a fancy to a gambling den at first glance and insisted on dragging Jiyu into it. Jiyu's ears were extremely sensitive and after shaking the sieve a few times, she heard the sieve. Jiyu was about to say something in her ear. But unexpectedly, the young girl covered Jiyu's mouth and casually took out a few magnetite stones. Those mysterious stones were placed on the dice. Seeing this, he turned his head and said indifferently, "You shouldn't have bet so much." After shouting this sentence, the person in front of him opened the dice cup in front of him with a grin. Seeing that the dice cup was opened, the corners of their mouths curled up in a happy smile. Jiyu stood up and said faintly, "See, I wasn't wrong." After hearing Jiyu's words, he said indifferently, "Thank you, young master." At this moment, Jiyu disappeared from the spot. He slowly took a step forward. The girl gritted her teeth, stamped her feet, and snorted. She seemed to be very unhappy. Jiyu touched her head. He said indifferently, Okay. Don't be angry." After saying this, Jiyu turned around and took out a bag from his arms. He put it on the sieve and shook it twice. After he put it down, Jiyu put his Shen energy on the table. With a loud bang, the sieve began to shake slightly. Jiyu said indifferently, "Open it." The shopkeeper smiled. He was very good at shaking the sieve. He could always control the number. This time, it was 2, 3, and 1 small. This fool gave me so many profound stones, it was simply the height of stupidity. When he thought of this, his heart was about to burst out laughing. However, he had not expected that Jiyu would point directly at the dice cup. When the dice cup was lifted, only 3 sixes could be seen on the table. The shopkeeper's face stiffened. He pointed at Jiyu's direction with trembling hands and kept saying, You. After he said the word you, his face darkened. He quickly calculated in his mind. The girl jumped into Ji-Yu's arms. He touched the girl's little head. When the two of them left, several people blocked Ji-Yu's path. Ji-Yu glanced at them and came forward. He said indifferently, "What's the matter?" Those people looked up and surrounded Ji-Yu. At this time, they came to Ji-Yu's direction. They unsheathed their swords, which were not even treasured weapons. They were just mortals. Ji-Yu's lips curled into a smile. When they saw that Ji-Yu was not afraid at all, they curled their lips. They directly rushed in Ji-Yu's direction. He jumped up and took out his Kuan Peng sword. Ji-Yu didn't like this kind of bully. When the sword was swung out, there was no need to use any profound energy at all. The profound energy was like a small explosive wave that directly flew out, and a loud rumbling sound was heard. There was a series of explosions around them. They fell into a pool of blood one after another. They covered their chests. They didn't expect that they would encounter a mysterious cultivator today. A mysterious cultivator was so terrifying. How could they resist? When they thought of this, they looked at each other. With a flash of his figure, he instantly disappeared from the spot. He seemed to be very afraid of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu said indifferently, with a cold snort, he immediately disappeared. Ji-Yu closed his eyes, but when he sensed that there were a few people staring at him, he raised his head. He looked up and looked into the sky. At this time, those people landed on the ground. They looked at Ji-Yu as if they were looking at a dead person. Ji-Yu smiled. "Come at me together." The few of them glanced at each other, clearly feeling the threat from Ji-Yu. They were immediately displeased. "Kid, don't think that you're so great just because you're a mysterious cultivator." The corners of their mouths curled into a smile as they charged towards Ji-Yu. Right at that moment, Ji-Yu leaped up and waved her hand. Immediately, an incomparably powerful wave of profound force swept out. The thugs of the gambling den were all Shen cultivators, but they didn't expect Ji-Yu's strength to be so formidable. Right at this moment, a few of them ran over and shouted at Ji-Yu, "Don't do anything, gang leader." Ji-Yu turned around, and the people in front of her let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, they did not make a move just now. Otherwise, they would have been in deep trouble. The few of them looked at each other and started to giggle. "Young master, are you tired? These are our people. When did I allow you to run a gambling den?" When they saw Ji-Yu's cold face, their hearts suddenly thumped. Ji-Yu's gaze was too terrifying. If they could, they would run away. They knelt on the ground. "Gang leader, we were wrong." Ji-Yu said indifferently, "From today onwards, the Dragon Slayer gang is not allowed to do this kind of business." The few of them kept kowtowing and saying yes. Only then did Ji-Yu stand up and take the young girl's hand and walk out. The young girl didn't like to eat meat, so Ji-Yu took her to a few vegetarian restaurants and shouted at the restaurant owner, "Eat. Boss, make one." The owner walked over and said with a smile, "Yes, sir." After eating and drinking to their heart's content, they planned to go to other places for a stroll. At this moment, a few people landed and blocked their way. Chapter 673. "Miss, please follow us back." The young girl sighed and said to Ji-Yu, "It's a pity that I can't have fun today." Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Do you really want to play here?" Hearing Ji-Yu's words, the young girl's eyes widened. But thinking of the rules in her family, she could only sigh. "So what? My father will definitely not allow it." After saying this, she sighed. Ji-Yu laughed, "As long as you want, I will definitely let you play to your heart's content." The two black-robed men in front of them frowned at this moment because Ji-Yu had already injured one of their protectors last time. They only recognized Ji-Yu now. One of the protectors took a step forward. "Who are you?" "Kid, you have already offended us last time. What else do you want to do now? The matters of our Lan family are not something a kid like you can manage. Your strength is still too weak." After saying this, Ji-Yu said indifferently, "I will definitely take care of this matter today. What can you do to me?" After hearing this sentence, the two protectors frowned. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from where they were. They raised their hands, drew their swords, and charged in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu stepped on the ground. He directly jumped up and a warhound's giant sword appeared in his hand. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu disappeared from where he was. He brandished his sword heavily. At this moment, the heavy sword chopped down. One of the black-robed protectors took 2 steps forward and a purple flame appeared in his hands. To be able to produce a flame of profound energy without using any profound skills, his strength should not be below the human profound realm. The flame and the huge war hound's sword heavily clashed together. A loud rumbling sound rang out. The two of them flew out at the same time. Jiyu raised his head and looked directly at the 2 protectors. He said indifferently, "Kid, you have some strength." After saying this, the 2 protectors raised their hands at the same time and waved their long robes. At this moment, their long robes covered the sky. They stretched out their hands and pointed at each other. A small seal appeared in the air. They waved their hands heavily in Jiyu's direction and the seal hit Jiyu. Jiyu did not sense any change in profound energy from the other side, but his own strength was sealed. The array within this array actually had a huge mystery. His heart trembled slightly. Could this be the legendary array formation? Thinking of this, Jiyu disappeared in the blink of an eye. After a while, he appeared behind the 2 protectors. Ding, the host used 3000 clouds movement. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. Ding, congratulations to the host for raising 3000 clouds movement to mastery. Jiyu looked at the 2 protectors in front of him. At this moment, he jumped up and slashed down with the huge Kuan Peng sword in his hand. Another loud sound rang out. The sounds of explosions in the surroundings were constantly transmitted to Jiyu's ears. Jiyu said indifferently, "You are very strong, but it's a pity that you met me, Jiyu." The gazes of the 2 protectors were fixed on Jiyu. It was as if countless killing intent was locked onto Jiyu's body. Jiyu resisted the strong mental strength, but after a while, one of the protectors used his mental strength to suppress Jiyu. In the blink of an eye, the 2 profound energy in the other protector's hands separated into 2 sides. 2 profound energy flame blades appeared in the protector's hands. At this moment, the protector instantly brandished the inferno blade in his hand and flew in front of Jiyu. Jiyu sensed this surge of Shen energy and raised his hand. All of a sudden, Jiyu's aura covered his body. He turned around indifferently. In an instant, he disappeared from where he was standing. He raised his hand and in an instant, the flame collided with the Qi aura. The Qi aura seemed to have a strong suction force. In the blink of an eye, the flame was absorbed. "Kid, what a demonic profound skill. You used such a profound skill, I'm sure the union of 10,000 immortals will punish you." The young girl took a step forward and said to the protectors in front of her, "Wait, I'll go back with you. Don't make things difficult for Jiyu's big brother." The 2 protectors looked at each other. The young girl came in front of Jiyu and said, "Remember, my name is Lan Jin." After saying this, countless fragments drifted down from the sky. The 2 of them placed their hands on Lan Jin's body and disappeared on the spot. Jiyu snorted coldly and clenched his fists. He clenched his fists tightly. "Lan Jin, I don't care what clan you are from. I'm going to pay you a visit." Only then did the disciples of the dragon-slaying gang arrive. "Gang leader, are you okay?" Jiyu shook his head slightly. Only then did they step forward and walk out. Jiyu looked up at this moment. He disappeared from the spot and appeared thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. They looked at each other and said indifferently, "Young Master Jiyu." 2 people stood in front of him and said indifferently, "If you don't hand over the head of the Gold City sect today, we will kill you." Jiyu smiled faintly and said, "You have to have the ability to do that. Boy, you are quite arrogant. Do you know who we are? I don't care who you are. We are the legal judges of the union of 10,000 immortals. You can't leave today." The corners of Jiyu's mouth curled into a smile. Didn't they want to take back the Gold City sect because of their magnetite? Jiyu immediately stretched out his hand and a storage ring appeared in his hand. There are 1 million upper-grade magnetite in it. Hearing Jiyu's words, They put their hands on Jiyu's hand and picked up the bag in Jiyu's hand. When he opened the bag, he saw that there were many pieces of magnetite inside. There are so many magnetite, which means that you are from a famous sect. Jiyu said, in the future, we will hand over a certain amount of magnetite to the Union of 10,000 Immortals every year. Please forgive us. After saying this, the two of them looked at each other. They smiled and cupped their hands. Then we will take our leave. By the way, as long as this decree is in place, no one in the Union of 10,000 Immortals will dare to have any opinions about the Gold City sect. Chapter 674. Jiyu cupped his hands in greeting. At this moment, the rest of the people disappeared on the spot. After returning to the Jincheng sect, Jiyu thought that their cultivation talent was not high yet, so he gathered everyone in the sect. Then, according to the contents of the Book of Formations, there might be a soaring pagoda above. The soaring pagoda was divided into more than 30 levels. It could directly absorb the Shen energy of heaven and earth and gather it in the soaring pagoda. A few elders walked over and saw that Jiyu was reading a book. They walked up and asked Jiyu, "Sect Master, what are you doing?" Jiyu turned his head and said to the people in front of him, "I plan to forge the soaring pagoda of the Jincheng sect. This way, the Shen energy of all the disciples will be greatly improved." After hearing this, everyone looked at each other. They said, "Sect Master's benevolence is really comparable to the sun and moon. With Sect Master leading us, we don't have to worry about the Shrine of Ice not becoming famous." After he finished speaking, several people behind him stepped forward, looked at each other, and said faintly, "But it requires a lot of Shen grade and countless heavenly treasures. It's very difficult to gather all of these heavenly treasures." They sighed and came out. At this moment, Jiyu disappeared on the spot and came out with the giant sword in his hand. He took 2 steps forward and said slowly, "It's okay, I can find it." After Jiyu said this, they looked at each other. Some of them can be bought from various places with Shen stones, but the flying locust stone can't be found in the small wilderness. So we can only look for it in that damned place. After saying this, they looked at each other and looked up. At this moment, they took a step forward and bowed slightly. Jiyu frowned and asked, "Where is this place?" "Hell Valley." "Where is that?" They looked at each other and said, "It's said that this place doesn't see the light of day all year round. Moreover, there are devils from the other 11 prefectures that were thrown into that sealed space. Later on, it was said that a powerful being sealed it." They couldn't help but sigh. They did know a little about the Shrine of Ice. At this moment, they looked at each other. He spoke to Jiyu indifferently, reporting to Sect Master, "We know where the entrance is, but we don't have any Shen energy on us right now, so we have no way to help you." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiyu's heart started beating rapidly. At this moment, he took a step forward, and his mind began to spin rapidly. "As long as you know where the entrance is, I'll leave it to you." Everyone was simply too satisfied with this new sect leader. They slightly bowed, cupped their hands and said, "Sect leader, we will open the profound door tomorrow." After saying this, the two of them looked at each other. When the disciples in the sect heard this, they all walked out and cupped their hands in the direction of the sect leader's palace. Those Shen cultivators placed their protective artifacts outside the sect leader's palace. It was rare for someone to make such a huge contribution to them. They knew how terrifying Hell Valley was. It was said that no one had ever been able to return to the real world from Hell Valley. Early the next morning, everyone gathered at the profound door at the back of the mountain. They looked at each other and came out. Several sect leaders stood below the sky-piercing platform and stretched out their hands. According to the sect leaders' instructions, they poured all of their Shen energy into the sky-piercing platform. At this moment, Jiyu also raised his hand at the same time. He waved his hand heavily, and several streams of Shen energy were poured into the profound door. At this moment, the profound door emitted a huge Shen light. It was as if a powerful Shen energy was constantly emitting power, as if it wanted to absorb everything in front of it. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu disappeared in front of the profound door. Darkness. Darkness completely enveloped this world. It was as if nothing else existed except for darkness. Ji raised his hand and took out a long wooden stick from his storage ring. In a moment, the inheritance of fire in his hand lit up the wooden stick. This caused a small ray of light to appear in this dark world. Whether the flying locust stone existed or not, and where it existed in this world, no one knew. He took 2 steps forward. His gaze locked in front of him, and he sent out his Shen energy. His Shen energy covered this world and spread out. However, it was as if there was a taboo in the surroundings, and Jiyu's Shen energy was reflected back. He took a step forward. Even if he used the 3,000 clouds movement here, when he did not know where he was going, he would feel a sense of confusion. At this moment, he looked around. Countless gusts of wind and fire blew. It was as if countless fine sand had covered the area in front of Jiyu. He felt the wind and sand blowing from nearby. Suddenly, Jiyu laughed out loud. Why didn't he think of this just now? He slapped his hand on the ground. The power of the inheritance of earth transmitted Jiyu's Shen energy into the fine sand. At this moment, Jiyu seemed to have merged with the sand and was able to see the world clearly. However, he sensed that there was a small city in front of him. This made everyone feel incomparably surprised. Just as he walked in front of the door, 2 black figures appeared in front of Jiyu. They carried a strong murderous aura. Instantly, their gazes locked on Jiyu. One of them walked out with a ferocious face. He laughed out loud. I didn't expect that after thousands of years, we would have a new person here. They looked at each other. Jiyu said slowly, hello, everyone. May I ask if you know where to find the flying locust stone? After hearing Jiyu's words, the black figure suddenly laughed out loud. Flying locust stone, ha ha ha. This is simply stupid. After saying this, they looked at each other. At this moment, they said slowly, you want to obtain the flying locust stone. Perhaps there is something you want here. Come in. Chapter 675. An enormous dark force was pressing down on Jiyu at this moment. The corners of Jiyu's mouth curled into a smile. Then, he dispelled that power. Even when facing the powerful dark force of the shadowy figure. She did not expect that the dark force would gradually spread to the surroundings at this moment. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Jiyu walked into the city gate. A scantily clad young girl walked out. Jiyu would not treat her as a young girl. Didn't she hear the people guarding the city gate say that the people here had at least 1,000 years of life? After Jiyu heard this, she disappeared on the spot. After a moment, the young girl's lips curled into a smile. 1,000 years ago, prisoners like us were exiled to this place. Those righteous Dao people kept teleporting in here, thinking that they could use us as fools to raise their own Shen strength. Fortunately, our Lord Sky Snake's Shen strength was boundless, so he directly sealed this dark netherworld. As she spoke, a few skinny people walked out. They madly pounced in front of Jiyu. The young girl snorted coldly. Reckless bastard. After shouting this sentence, the 2 skinny people suddenly froze on the spot. A huge sharp sword appeared in the young girl's hand. She suddenly chopped down on the 2 people's bodies. After receiving the sword's attack, the 2 people were stunned. She disappeared on the spot in an instant. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked in the direction of Jiyu. She slowly opened her mouth and said, "This is a safe zone specially arranged by Lord Sky Snake. You are not allowed to kill here. Those who violate the order will die. On the contrary, there is a killing field in the city. You can kill above it. And you can obtain the Fountain of Youth by killing every day." Fountain of Youth. Jiyu's face showed a trace of confusion. What is this Fountain of Youth? We can enjoy eternal life here, but we will continue to age. Some people cherish their lives and are willing to exchange their youth for peace. But so what? A disdainful smile appeared on the girl's face. She waved her hand. A building beside him had collapsed, and on top of an iron bed, there were 7 to 8 dried corpses that looked like they were about to die. If you are willing to have peace, this is not a bad choice. All right, that's all I have to say. The choice is in your hands. After saying that, she disappeared like a ghost. Ji sensed that the weakest one here was still around the first level of the human profound realm. When he sensed this, he couldn't help but laugh. Countless passers-by walked out of the nearby tavern. No matter where one was, taverns would always exist. Especially in this world filled with darkness, the hearts of people needed to be stable. Ji also entered the tavern. One of them raised his head and said to Ji, "What would you like to drink? Just give me a bottle." After saying that, they took a step forward, cupped their hands slightly, and looked in the direction of Ji. Not long after, a cup of blood was placed in front of Ji. At this moment, the two of them raised their hands and slashed their long swords in the direction of Ji. Looking at the cup of blood, Ji just leaned to the side, and the long sword slashed on the table. In a short moment, the table was split into pieces. He opened his eyes, looked to the side, and said indifferently, "Why did you sneak attack me? He has profound stones." After shouting this, the people around him all looked in front of Ji. "I am at the first level of the human profound realm. Thank you for your guidance. I am at the second level of the human profound realm. I would also like to fight with you." "Cut the crap. I heard that this guy is a newcomer. Maybe he is from one of those so-called righteous sects. Do you see any killing intent on him?" That's right. Why don't you count me in?" They all laughed out loud, as if Ji was the funniest joke in the world. Ji frowned. These bastards, did they really think that he was easy to bully? He stomped on the ground and disappeared in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he pulled out his sword. Looking at the precious weapon on him, he swung his sword. At this moment, a silver light flashed. The light appeared and swept across their necks. Logically speaking, the girl's figure appeared in this tavern. She looked at the two dead people and said, "The safe zone has its rules. How dare you break the rules?" After shouting this, she snorted coldly, and a huge amount of mental energy covered over. Ji stood in place, and forcibly collided with it with his own mental energy. A loud boom sounded. At this moment, the two mental energies collided. Ji took a step back and raised his head. The power of inheritance in his hand instantly burst out. Countless lightning bolts, like small snakes, twisted their bodies and flew directly in the direction of the girl. The girl took a step forward, and her figure flashed. She appeared behind Ji and shattered those lightning snakes. She smiled faintly, and turned into a long snake. She slithered on the ground and came behind Ji. She opened her sharp teeth and directly bit down on Ji's neck. Ji turned around, and the huge Kuan Peng sword fell on the long snake's teeth. Ding, the host used Raging Flames. Received 1 by 999 experience points. Ding, congratulations to the host. Raging Flames has broken through to the small success level. The girl's teeth were burned by the flames. She sensed Ji use pure Xian energy, and immediately turned into her human form. "How dare you?" Ji snorted coldly. "They attacked me first. You didn't have time to protect me, so I had to protect myself. What is wrong with that?" After hearing Ji's words, the other party looked at each other, and slowly said to Ji, who was in front of him, "In that case, it is reasonable. However, you have also violated the rule of killing. You no longer have the right to stay here. Just hand over the token I gave you." Ji took out a token from her bosom and tossed it at him. The girl took Ji's token, and told him to leave the safe zone immediately. Chapter 676. The remaining people in the tavern looked at each other. They walked straight to the side. Their eyes were fixed on Ji, and a smile appeared on their faces. Without the protection of the safe zone, it meant that Ji was about to face endless slaughter. In the middle of the line, there were several black figures standing in the same place. Among them, there was a fierce look in their eyes. They raised their heads and looked beyond the center line. Seeing that Ji was coming, but he didn't have the waste token on him, there was a trace of ridicule on his face. "You can go in. But after you go in, you will face death. Go in. What surprised these men was that Ji did not even look back as he entered the center line. The men beside him stood up and drew their swords. Are you going to kill him? Big brothers, this guy is very powerful. You have to be careful when we come back. After saying this, the two guards laughed out loud. Don't worry. With us here, we'll definitely make sure you don't die. When these people heard this sentence, their mood instantly improved and they cupped their hands at the same time. Go. They waved their long robes and charged in the direction of Ji. The Kuan Peng sword appeared in Ji's hand. She turned around and brandished her own sword. Her sword collided with the Kuan Peng sword. A loud bang was heard. With a loud bang, the two people were repelled. More than a dozen people put on their waist tokens. They opened their eyes wide and fixed their gazes on Ji. At this moment, they were charging in the direction of Ji. Mystical skill, Earth Chariot. After one of the purple-robed old men shouted, the fine sand that was constantly blowing quickly solidified at this moment. The fine sand was quickly condensing at this moment. At this moment, the fine sand rushed in the direction of Ji like a wave. Ji chopped down with the Kuan Peng giant sword heavily. The giant sword chopped into the soil with a boom. At this moment, the soil gradually swallowed Ji's Kuan Peng giant sword. At this moment, the fine sand slowly entered the giant sword. Suddenly, a ball of fire appeared on the giant sword. The raging flames burned the giant sword as if it possessed a firebird. It let out a roar and flew out, breaking through the earth. At this moment, the fine sand was shattered into pieces. Ji took a step forward. Looking at the fine sand in the sky, he suddenly became vigilant. At this moment, he brandished his long sword and swung it heavily. A loud rumbling sound was heard. At this moment, the fine sand collapsed in two directions. Ji turned his gaze to the front. At this moment, those clods of dirt once again charged forward. Ji's Kuan Peng giant sword shouted out. Xian skill, lightning snake. After shouting this sentence, countless lightning snakes flew out. Those long snakes flew out at this moment and directly rushed in the direction of Ji. Ji turned around and instantly disappeared from where he was standing. After waiting for a moment, Ji flew up. The Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand called out the weapon spirit. The power of the Kuan Peng was not something that these small Xian cultivators could resist. Seeing the soil, the Kuan Peng giant sword roared and opened its bloody mouth. In an instant, it seemed like a giant mouth that could swallow the sky. It swallowed everything in front of it into its stomach. Those long swords were swallowed by it at this moment. Those people did not expect Ji to have such strength. Their hearts kept beating faster. Oh no, we are no match for him. Run. No one knew who shouted first, but everyone turned their heads at the same time. As if they had gone mad, they ran towards the center line without a care for their lives. However, Ji was like a bloodthirsty demon, following behind them. From time to time, Ji's sword fell and took away a life. There were 3 people who finally saw the light. They were now standing outside the center line. Those few guards immediately released their Xian energy. At this moment, their Qi gang covered the sky. They fixed their eyes on Ji. However, Ji turned around and opened his eyes wide. Ji opened his eyes wide and waved his hand heavily. Several Xian lights lit up and 18 golden puppets flew out in an instant. They flew in front of those people, as if they would face death if they took a step forward. When he saw this, Ji's figure flashed and disappeared from his original spot. He opened his eyes wide. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Kill." At this moment, the 18 golden puppets turned their heads. The golden puppets in their hands raised their hands and shouted anxiously, "Save me." After shouting this sentence, they fixed their eyes on Ji. At this moment, the guards fixed their eyes on Ji's face. They turned around and fixed their eyes on Ji. They raised their hands at the same time and prepared to kill Ji. Ji had only taken 2 steps forward, but the giant sword in his hand was already brandishing in an instant. There was a loud rumbling sound. 2 streams of blood spurted out from the 2 people. They fell to the ground one after another. The 2 people only put one hand on the center line and closed their eyes in despair. There was no trace of a Xian cultivator's gaze. At this moment, they fixed their eyes on Ji. At this moment, Ji slowly said, "They're already dead." "What do you think?" After hearing this sentence, the 2 people looked at each other. One of the guards said, "You actually killed them before the center line." But he put his hand on the center line. "Maybe he will be a little suspicious." After saying this, he placed the center line in the middle of the ground. The few of them exchanged glances before locking their gazes on Ji. Ji took out 2 bags from her bosom and threw them into the other party's hands. Seeing so many magnetite, she was stunned. The corners of their mouths curled up into a smile. Then, he waved his hand heavily. They took 2 steps forward and closed their eyes, as if nothing had happened. Ji snorted, turned around, and walked in another direction. At this moment, there was a clap of thunder in the sky. Chapter 677. Ji looked ahead and saw a huge light screen appear in the sky. The lightning bolts continued to fall on the huge dueling ground. Ji stepped into the arena. A guard walked out and handed a token to Ji. Their gazes locked onto Ji. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "This token is your proof of entry into the arena." At this moment, Ji stepped into the huge arena. Everyone was sitting in the spectator seats, and they were shouting non-stop. "Boy, are you going to participate? We can use points to gain the power of the strong." He pointed at the treasure list behind him. Ji saw the flying locust stone on the list and said slowly, "How many points does this flying locust stone cost?" 99,999 points will do. But in the arena, you can only get 1 point for winning a battle. After saying this, Ji cupped his hands slightly. Turning around, he took a step forward and walked to the front of the duel arena. They glanced at each other. Ji said indifferently, "I'm going to sign up." After shouting this sentence, the 2 of them looked at each other and recorded it in their notebooks. In the arena, a man walked out and put his hand on his throat. At the same time as this voice spread out, the profound energy also spread out. "Everyone, welcome to the arena. Let us welcome the great Lord Sky Snake." An old man walked out and sat on the chair. He waved his hand and the crowd sat on the spectator seats. They had no choice. His strength was too terrifying. In an instant, they could only lower their heads. Only Ji was still standing. Looking at Ji in front of them, they slowly said, "Duel, duel." Everyone raised their heads when they heard the shouts. They looked at Ji. Ji slowly took 2 steps forward and locked his eyes on Lord Sky Snake. However, the commentator in the duel arena had already started to shout loudly, "Everyone, we are going to start the first duel. Let us welcome God of Thunder." A fat man walked out, and the profound strength of the 4th level of the human profound realm was suddenly released from his body, causing everyone to shout enviously, "God of Thunder, God of Thunder." His opponent, Tianfang. Tianfang walked out and looked at Ji. They slowly said, "Kill, kill, kill." God of Thunder has 63 victories and has not lost a single battle. Tianfang has only lost 1 battle. Who is stronger? Let the competition begin. After shouting this sentence, the 2 of them looked at each other. Tianfang smiled faintly. God of Thunder smiled and said, "Logically speaking, the loser dies. However, Tianfang, your beauty is indeed hard to forget." He smiled faintly and said, "You are really too beautiful. If you can accompany this god for a night, I will spare your life." After saying that, the Thunder God's great sword appeared in Thunder God's hand. Holding the Thunder God's great sword, he charged towards Tian Shoufang. At this moment, Tianfang disappeared from her original position and appeared in the void in the blink of an eye. Countless peach blossom petals slowly fell. It was as if this was the most beautiful scene in the world. Especially those trapped in this dark world, they were extremely eager to return to the human world. As long as they could return to the human world, They would definitely pay any price. However, there was no such opportunity now. They fixed their eyes on the room and saw countless petals falling from the room. These petals reminded them of the time when they were in the human world. Even God of Thunder couldn't help but be slightly stunned. However, when he thought of what happened before, his heart trembled slightly. Many of those opponents would die after seeing the petals. Thinking of this, he suddenly turned around and brandished his long sword, swinging it out with all his might. As the sword fell, he grabbed the Thunder God sword in front of him and slashed in Tian Fang-er's direction. At this moment, Tian Fang-er suddenly turned her body. The two bolts of lightning in his hands suddenly lit up. Tian Fang-er's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. At this moment, the silk threads in her hands slowly flew out and tied God of Thunder's hands. God of Thunder was actually locked to the ground by these pink silk threads. She raised her hand, holding the long sword, and slowly walked in front of God of Thunder. She raised the huge sword in her hand and stabbed down. At this moment, the long sword in her hand stabbed into God of Thunder's body, causing blood to flow out. God of Thunder's heart was directly dug out by Tian Fang-er. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were fixed on Ji-yu. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Boy, you have big dog guts." After shouting this, Ji-yu's figure flashed, disappearing from where he was. A moment later, he appeared not far away, standing on the stage. When Tian Fang-er came down, she glanced at Ji-yu with a faint smile on her face. The remaining people looked in the direction of Ji-yu. Such a thin and weak person, he's simply courting death. Haha, I don't know what kind of ability this boy has to enter the duel arena. To be exiled here, he must have a great reputation in the human world. I don't know what kind of ability this boy has. After the voices of the crowd fell, the commentator opened his mouth and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new person today. This mister has never stepped into the duel arena before. Let us welcome this brave warrior." Duel, duel, duel. After 3 shouts, their eyes all looked in the direction of Ji-yu. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Come." After saying this, they looked at each other. Let us welcome Divine Sword Li Fei. Li Fei walked out with a trace of disdain on his face. "You actually want me to fight with this kind of trash? You're really embarrassing me." There was a trace of disdain on their faces as they looked in the direction of Ji-yu. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Who is the trash? We'll know later." After hearing this, the two of them looked at each other. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.